My name is Vivian, and I live with my husband George and our 2-year-old son Michael. Vivian, today marks 3 years since we started dating, doesn't it? George said, breaking the silence. Yes, it does. Time flies so fast, I replied, sensing something different in his tone. What's wrong, George? You seem a bit off, I asked with concern. Vivian, there's something I want to tell you today, George began hesitantly. I want you to marry me, he continued, echoing his proposal. Over the years, we had shared countless moments together. Initially, time with George was bliss for me, wrapped in his kindness and thoughtfulness. I felt genuinely happy. However, as days turned into years, the daily bustle and other factors began to change our relationship. Hey Vivian, didn't I say I wanted roast beef today? Why is it just leftovers from yesterday? George interrupted my thoughts. I'm sorry, George. I have to take care of Michael. I can't prepare anything too complicated, I explained, feeling a pang of guilt. I don't need such excuses. Parenting is just taking care of Michael, right? Stop making such a big deal out of it, George snapped, his frustration palpable. Working at my parents' company is tough. Well, I'm going to be the next president, so I have to endure it, he continued, his tone condescending. George worked at my in-laws' company, spending his days buried in work. Despite this, his efforts often seemed ordinary, and he struggled to meet his quotas. Who's making a big deal here? I don't need dinner tonight. Oh, I might not come home tonight. I have golf with a senior from work tomorrow. So take care of things at home and make sure to prepare a proper dinner tonight, okay? George's words stung, leaving me speechless. The taste is so bland. You really can't do anything right nowadays, he remarked later that evening, further straining our already tense atmosphere. Smiles and meaningful conversations like those in our early days of marriage dwindled, replaced by George's frequent absences. Even on weekends, he prioritized outings with friends and hobbies over family time. During maternity leave, I dedicated myself to protecting our family, waking early to care for Michael and manage household chores. Despite my efforts, exhaustion and unspoken feelings toward George began to weigh heavily on me. Occasionally, I found solace in memories of our early marriage, the happy moments and George's infectious smile. Yet it was clear that things had changed. Mom, Michael hugged me with a smile. Michael's innocent joy brought a brief respite. Lately, he had started calling me Mom more often, a small comfort in the midst of growing distance between George and me. I spent my days hoping our relationship would rekindle as Michael grew. However, deep down, I knew our bond had already cooled. One morning, as I tidied the room before George left for work, I noticed him descending from the second floor, not in his usual suit, but in casual clothes I had never seen before. They must be new. Aren't you supposed to be at work today? I asked, puzzled. I'm going to work. I don't need a suit today, George replied dismissively. Seriously, stop nagging me. If I say it's fine, then it's fine. Don't butt in every time, he retorted sharply, leaving me at a loss for words. I was just asking, that's what's annoying. Anyway, I'm leaving now, George said, his departure through the front door feeling like an escape. I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't heading to his office. Where was he going? I tried not to dwell on the answer. The distance between George and me seemed to widen with each passing day. Our conversations became scarce, tinged with a cold atmosphere. The smiles and kindness from our past felt like distant memories. Now, his words were laced with criticism and sarcasm. Whether he commented on my cooking or cleaning, his sharp remarks pierced my heart. Was it all my fault? Days were spent in self-doubt, questioning why our relationship had changed so drastically. Time passed without clarity. Despite my efforts in managing the household and caring for Michael, it never seemed enough for George. The decrease in conversation and his cold demeanor hurt deeply. His once kind and considerate words had been replaced by constant critique. Something inside me broke. My love for George faded and memories of happier times became distant. A sense of indifference replaced the emptiness in my heart. What was the point of everything I had done so far? Mom, look, I made this. Michael's voice interrupted my thoughts. Oh wow, that's amazing. Did you draw this? I asked, genuinely impressed. Yeah, this one's a dog, and this is a cat, Michael explained proudly. You're really good at drawing, Michael. I praised him, his smile warming my heart. As time passed, my feelings shifted. As my love for George waned, my love for Michael deepened. Watching him grow, I began seriously considering my future. specifically divorce. I couldn't continue in a relationship where George barely contributed to parenting, let alone fulfilling his role as a father. The prospect of liberation from George seemed more overwhelming than daunting. However, one concern weighed on me. On the way to a promised meeting with Michael's grandparents, we arrived at their doorstep. "Hello, Mother." "Hi, Grandma." Michael greeted them warmly. "Hello, Michael. Have you grown taller again?" Grandma exclaimed with joy. "Really?" "Yay!" Michael cheered, delighted by her praise. "It's good to see you. Come on in, Grandma. Welcome us inside." "Thank you, I will." It was George's parents, my in-laws. Despite my frayed relationship with George, they had always been a source of comfort. They ran a nearby business and had shown unwavering kindness and support towards Michael and me. "That's right, I bought some delicious sweets at the station. I'll serve them with coffee now. Please have a seat and relax," Grandma insisted kindly. "Let me help," I offered. No, it's fine. You must be tired from childcare. Just have a seat. You need to rest when you can," Grandma reassured me. "Thank you, Mother," I replied gratefully. My in-laws treated me like their own daughter. Their presence was a soothing balm. They invited us over almost every week, genuinely interested in our well-being. Their voices were always kind, like comforting music to me. They cherished their time with Michael, showering him with toys and playing with him every chance they got. I experienced their kindness deeply, feeling genuinely cherished. Sometimes my father-in-law would take Michael to a nearby park because he knew Michael loved birds. He even bought him a bird book once. These thoughtful gestures deepened our bond. My in-laws listened attentively to my troubles, including issues with George and domestic difficulties. They responded with understanding and compassion. Their words of encouragement and advice filled me with gratitude, bringing a warm breeze into our home. Their kindness was a great help. "I'm worried if George is causing you trouble," my mother-in-law once remarked with a troubled smile. As my father-in-law played with Michael, I couldn't help but reply with a smile. Perhaps she sensed the complexity of my relationship with George. "No, it's fine," I assured her, though her worried smile lingered. My father-in-law also showed concern for my well-being, often creating new recipes for me, knowing my love for delicious food. His thoughtful gestures and the times he comforted me while playing with Michael brought me peace. "Michael, what kind of animal shall we see next time?" my father-in-law asked playfully. "I want to see big fish next time," Michael exclaimed excitedly. "All right, let's go to the aquarium next time," my father-in-law suggested, eliciting a joyful yay from Michael. Watching them interact, I couldn't help but smile. Michael adored his grandparents, showing them a carefree smile that rarely graced his face with George. "Vivian, feel free to talk to us about anything," my mother-in-law said kindly as we were leaving. Her words pained my heart a bit. Little did she know, I was contemplating divorce from George. I didn't want to burden my in-laws or sadden them. Even if my relationship with George couldn't be repaired, I cherished my bond with my in-laws and wanted Michael to continue enjoying his time with them. I was apprehensive about opening up to them about George, fearing their reaction. Just as these worries occupied my mind, an unexpected incident unfolded. My in-laws had kindly offered to take care of Michael, allowing me to enjoy a cafe outing with a friend. "It's been a long time since we've had a cafe like this, hasn't it?" my friend remarked as we sat down, sipping our coffee. "Really, Vivian, you've seemed busy recently," she observed with concern. "Have I?" I replied vaguely, trying to brush off the worry in her eyes. "Hey, Vivian, has something happened with your husband recently?" My friend hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "What do you mean?" I asked, tilting my head in confusion. "Well, actually, I saw something the other day. I saw your husband walking with a woman. I don't know." My friend's voice trailed off, her expression troubled. For a moment, my mind went blank. Deep down, though, a part of me wasn't surprised. Reflecting on George's recent behavior, there had been signs I had chosen to ignore. My friend held my hand silently, her eyes conveying understanding. "Vivian, I think you should talk to George," she finally said gently. "Yeah, maybe. I haven't been myself lately," I admitted quietly, feeling the weight of her concern. "That's why I invited you to a cafe today," she explained softly. "Is that so? Sorry for worrying you," I apologized. "Don't apologize, Vivian. Whatever decision you make about George, I'm on your side," she assured me warmly. "Thank you," I replied gratefully, parting ways with her and heading home. Although I was initially shocked by the startling truth, strangely, I felt calm now, even a bit relieved. This revelation gave me the clarity to end my relationship with George without hesitation. Imagining the future living just with Michael, despite the uncertainties, strengthened my resolve. I needed to be strong for Michael's sake. "I'm home," I announced as I entered the house. "Ah, today was exhausting. Welcome back," George greeted me casually, not noticing my subdued demeanor. "Hey," I started, my voice steady but firm, "I've been waiting for your return," as George carelessly threw his bag on the sofa. In a low voice, I told him, "George, we need to talk." "Can it wait until after dinner?" George replied, visibly annoyed. "No, I want to talk about it now," I insisted. "What now?" "Such a hassle," George grumbled, avoiding eye contact. "Well, this situation is your fault, isn't it?" I confronted him. "Huh? What are you talking about?" George looked puzzled, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "I heard from my friend. Is it true that you were walking with another woman?" I pressed, my voice steady. George's reaction was undeniable confirmation. His face changed color instantly, and his eyes darted around, searching for an escape. "That must be a mistake. Your friend saw, right?" George stammered. "She heard your voice and even knows the store you two went into. Shall I confirm it with the store staff?" I challenged, feeling a surge of boldness. "It's useless to hide it," I continued as George struggled for words. "Damn it," George spat out bitterly, his anger surfacing. "Yeah, that's right. Her name is Zoe. Unlike you, she's perfect at work, in housekeeping, and she's cute. She even said she likes me, even though I'm married." "Yeah, that just shows how attractive I am, right?" George mocked, his tone cutting. "I loved you, George, even though you're married," he mimicked Zoe's words. Would a normal woman approach a married man like that? There must be more to it, I reasoned, but George's dismissive attitude was clear. "Why should I feel bad for you and Michael? You should be ashamed for not supporting me more in my hard work," George retorted defensively. "I heard from your father and mother that you hadn't even met your work quotas. Can you still say you're working hard?" I shot back, feeling the weight of disappointment. "I'm doing things my way. I'm going to be the next president, so don't interfere," George asserted arrogantly. "I doubt you'll ever become president," I stated quietly, my resolve hardening. "What did you say?" George's voice rose. "Fine, I'm done with you. Let's divorce," I declared firmly, unable to bear his excuses any longer. "I'll divorce you and marry Zoe. Do whatever you want," George pointed at me, his words sharp and hurtful. "Don't talk bad about Zoe. You're just jealous of her, aren't you?" George accused, misinterpreting my stunned silence for shock. "That's not the case," I replied quietly. "I'll show you. You'll regret this when you come begging to me later," George shouted angrily, storming out of the house, likely heading to Zoe's place. Impulsively, I tried to follow him but tripped over a slightly lifted carpet edge. I fell hard, hitting my back against the table with a sharp pain I had never felt before. Overwhelmed by the intense agony, I groaned, unable to move. Crawling towards my smartphone nearby, I dialed for an ambulance as darkness threatened to engulf me. "Mom, where am I?" Michael's voice brought me back when I woke up. I lay in the hospital bed, my head spinning and my body itching all over. A nurse quickly came to my aid and called a doctor. Seeing my anxious state, they explained what had happened and tried to calm my nerves. "It's okay, you'll gradually recover," the nurse assured me. "Yes, thank you," I managed, trying to absorb the news. "Anyway, it's good that your life isn't in danger," the doctor added. However, the results of the subsequent examination shocked me deeply. The fall had caused spinal cord damage, making it difficult for me to walk. I was informed that I would need a wheelchair, and my life would change drastically. After being discharged, life at home proved more challenging than I had anticipated. I realized I couldn't manage household chores, childcare, or even take care of myself alone. At the suggestion of my in-laws, I decided to live with them for a while. Since I couldn't rely on George for help and with Michael there too, I had no choice but to lean on their kindness. They must have been suspicious of George's absence despite my condition. I knew I had to tell them the truth soon. Just as I contemplated this, the front door of my in-laws' house swung open with a loud noise. "George, where have you been?" Ignoring calls when Vivian is in such a condition, my mother-in-law scolded as George entered. "So, she's really in a wheelchair, huh?" George scoffed, looking at my condition. A useless woman who can't do household chores or childcare is of no use to me. Hurry up and divorce me and pay me compensation for all the trouble. How can you say such a thing to Vivian? My father-in-law interjected, shocked. It's okay, Mom, Dad, I murmured weakly, feeling the weight of George's callous words. Vivian, let's get a divorce, George declared coldly. I'm sorry, Father, Mother, I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. I couldn't stay with George anymore. Surprisingly, his cruel words didn't sting. They simply confirmed that my love for him had completely faded. Contrary to my in-law's surprise, George seemed oddly cheerful. But that you understand now, I can freely marry Zoe, George remarked casually. George, were you seeing another woman? My father-in-law interjected, taken aback. Yeah, so what? What's the big deal? George shrugged. Despite having Vivian, she's boring, not particularly cute, and can't handle housework or childcare properly. How can you say that? My mother-in-law exclaimed, shocked. Vivian has been trying so hard with housework and raising Michael. Yeah, whatever, George dismissed, his tone callous. Anyway, I've decided to be with Zoe. Dad, it's time to hand over the company to me. You're getting old. Nonsense. I won't let someone like you take over the company, my father-in-law retorted firmly. Come on, who else is there but me? Anyway, I'm busy, so send me the divorce papers by mail, okay? George concluded, nonchalant. After separating from George, I started a new life. Currently, I live comfortably in a house recommended by my in-laws. With the help of a caretaker, they suggested my daily life feels easier than before. However, amidst this calm, an unexpected development awaited. One day, while peacefully passing time, the doorbell rang. Glancing at the monitor, I saw George standing outside, his face a mix of confusion and desperation. Hey, Vivian, what the hell is going on? George blurted out. George, what's up? I replied calmly, masking my surprise. I got fired from the company. I suppose Dad just keeps saying it can't be helped, George confessed, his desperation evident. Oh dear, I murmured sympathetically. Mom and Dad are saying you're no longer our son. We're cutting ties with you, George continued, his voice tinged with disbelief. That's tough, I responded quietly, trying to process his sudden vulnerability. I didn't know about the stocks. I had no idea you owned 90% of my parents' company's stocks. Why didn't you tell me? George pleaded. Because you never asked, I replied evenly. You're supposed to disclose that kind of thing, even if I don't ask. So, what do you want to say in the end? I asked, trying to gauge his intentions. You know what I want. I want you to cancel my dismissal. You're the one who fired me, right? If you own that much of the company, you can undo my firing, George implored desperately. That's right. Please, Vivian. I've been rejected from all other company interviews. No other company will hire me except the current one, George pleaded, his desperation palpable. If you thought that, you should have worked more seriously. I'll work seriously from now on, so please cancel my firing. You don't have to worry about being fired. Zoe can support you, can't she? Zoe dumped me the moment she realized I couldn't become president. She was only interested in my position, George admitted bitterly. I thought as much, I replied calmly, my heart unmoved. Please, Vivian, you're all I have left. Let's get married again. It would be better for you too, right? George proposed, his voice tinged with hope. I was stunned by his words. What are you even saying? You're in a wheelchair, right? You need my help, and Michael needs his father, George pressed, trying to sway me. My anger surged at his audacity. How dare you say such things? I'm sorry, but the lady does not wish to speak with you anymore, Jack, the helper, interjected firmly before I could respond. Huh? Who are you? George demanded, taken aback. I'm talking to Vivian, Jack replied sternly. As I said, the lady does not wish to converse with you. That can't be. Vivian needs me, George protested desperately. That's right, I'll say it again. I have nothing to say to you, and I don't want to see you ever again, I affirmed firmly through Jack. Why, Vivian? If you leave me too, then. George began, but Jack forcefully turned off the monitor. I found myself oddly captivated by Jack's rare display of anger. He was slightly older than me, introduced as a helper by my in-laws. Stern yet kind, Jack had grown close to Michael and become an indispensable part of our lives. Now, what? I mused aloud. watching Jack with newfound respect. Eventually, I heard that George, abandoned by Zoe and his parents, was walking a lonely path. However, his fate no longer concerned me. Whatever his situation, he had no part in my life anymore. Supported by my in-laws and Jack, I found peace in my new home. With Jack's assistance, I managed household chores and childcare better, slowly regaining confidence in my abilities. Meeting new people and sharing smiles in my daily life, I felt my heart gradually moving in a more positive direction. Though my past with George was challenging, I had overcome it and discovered a new me. Our paths had diverged. George may be filled with regrets on his lonely path, but I was walking towards a new future. This future was filled with peaceful days and happiness, surrounded by beloved people.
My name's Emma. Jack and I have a son, Liam, who's 20 and off at college right now. We've been scrimping and saving for years to keep him there, cutting corners, skipping vacations, you name it, all so he could have a shot at something bigger. We live in the house my grandmother left us when she moved into a nursing home. It's large, comfy, but nothing fancy, just feels like home. Jack works at the local hardware store, and I manage the front desk at a doctor's office. We make do, living a no-frills kind of life, and that's just fine by us. It was a Thursday afternoon, sun hanging just right, made you think about calling it a day early. But then Jack's phone rang, cutting through any thoughts of an early weekend. I was chopping carrots, mind half on dinner, half on a list of bills that needed paying, when I heard him answer. "Hello? Mom? Slow down, what's wrong?" His face went white as he listened. I stopped what I was doing, towel in hand, watching him pace. He ended the call, looking shaken. "That was my dad," he said, sinking into the couch like his strings had been cut. "Their business tanked. Bankrupt. They've lost everything, even the house." My heart sank. "Oh, Jack, that's terrible. What are they planning to do?" "They want to come stay with us. Just for a bit," they said, "till they sort something out." I hesitated, thinking about our already tight budget, the quiet order of our life that was about to be upended. "And what did you tell them?" He rubbed his neck, a sure sign he was stressed. "Told them I'd talk to you first. It's your house, Emma. Wouldn't just spring that on you without checking." Jack's parents, Frank and Helen, they weren't the easygoing type. High flyers, used to the good life, and our simple setup was miles from what they were accustomed to. "You know how they are, Jack. This house, it ain't their style." I know. He looked uneasy. "But they're my folks, Em. They're stuck." Thinking of all the times they'd visited, noses turned up at our modest living, it was clear they'd be like fish out of water here. But then, picturing them desperate enough to ask for help, my resolve softened. "All right, they can come. But it's temporary, right? Just till they're back on their feet?" He picked up his phone, dialed, and after a short, muffled exchange, "Mom, Emma, and I talked it over. You can crash here for a bit. But just till you find a place, got it? We're not running a hotel." I couldn't hear what was said on the other end, but Jack's tight-lipped, "Yes, Mom, we're clear," gave me the gist. He hung up and exhaled long and hard. "They're thankful, Em. They'll be here next week." Last week, Jack told his folks they could stay with us for a bit. And today, they were moving in. I watched from the porch as two huge trucks rolled up our driveway, and I swear, my heart sank. Jack was out there directing traffic like some parking lot attendant, trying to keep a smile plastered on his face. Frank was the first to barrel out of the car, a big grin on his face, clapping Jack on the back so hard you'd think he'd won the lottery and not just moved into his son's house. "Emma, darling." Helen swept up to me, all perfumed and peppy, planting a kiss on my cheek that felt more like a branding iron. "You're an angel for letting us invade like this." I forced a smile, my eyes darting to the mountain of stuff they were unloading. "It's no problem, Helen. But, is this all of it?" "Oh, this is just the essentials." She waved a dismissive hand, as if the pile of furniture and boxes wasn't already swallowing our front yard. "The rest we've put in storage." "Essentials?" I bit my tongue to keep from saying anything rash. If these were essentials, I dreaded to think what they'd left behind. Jack caught my eye, and I could tell he was thinking the same thing. "Let's get this stuff inside then," Jack said, more to himself than anyone else. Frank and Helen directed the movers with the kind of authority you'd think they were moving into a palace, not our modest little home. The movers shuffled past, hauling in armchairs, countless boxes, and, would you believe it, a grandfather clock. Who needs a grandfather clock in their temporary home? "Right there, boys, just set it all there," Frank directed, pointing at various spots around our living room, which was rapidly disappearing under a sea of their belongings. I pulled Jack aside while the movers took a breather. "Jack, this is crazy. They've brought enough to furnish a whole house. Where are we going to put all this?" Jack rubbed his temples. I know. I'll talk to them, okay? Let's just get through today." We retreated as the movers continued their work. The whole ground floor was turning into a replica of Frank and Helen's old house. Every corner filled, every space taken over. By the time the movers were done, our once cozy living room looked more like a storage unit. Dinner that night was a chaotic affair. We barely found the table under all the clutter. Frank and Helen seemed oblivious to the mess, chatting away about their journey here. "Emma, you really should try this wine," Frank said, popping open a bottle of something French and probably more expensive than our entire grocery budget for the week. "We're so grateful to you both," Helen chimed in, her voice sugary enough to give you cavities. "It's just till we find our feet." "Yeah, about that," Jack started, clearing his throat. "We need to talk about some ground rules. Space is tight, and—" "Oh, don't worry about it, son," Frank waved him off. "We'll manage just fine. Won't we, dear?" He smiled at Helen, who nodded enthusiastically. I looked around at our invaded space, the piles of boxes, the fancy ornaments, crowding out our simple decorations. Manage just fine? I wasn't so sure about that. Living with Frank and Helen had been an adjustment, to put it mildly. A few days have passed since they moved in, and just when I thought we'd settled into some kind of routine, the kitchen became the new battleground. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was fixing dinner like usual. Something simple and hearty, spaghetti with a homemade tomato sauce. I was stirring the pot when Helen waltzed into the kitchen, her nose wrinkling as if she'd just walked into a barn. "What's that smell?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "It's dinner," I replied, keeping my voice as steady as I could manage. "Spaghetti night." "Spaghetti?" she scoffed, peering over my shoulder. "Where's the meat? The fresh herbs? This is what you feed us?" Jack, hearing the commotion, wandered in, drying his hands on a dish towel. "What's the problem?" His mom turned to him with a look that could curdle milk. "The problem, Jack, is that we're expected to eat this." She gestured at the bubbling pot as if it were a cauldron of poison. I took a deep breath, trying not to let her get to me. "It's what we usually eat. We can't afford steaks and fancy meals every night." Jack stepped between us, his face set in hard lines. "Mom, this is Emma's house, and this is what we eat. If you want something else, you're welcome to cook for yourselves." "Oh, we will," Helen retorted, her eyes narrowing. "And we expect you to provide the groceries we require. We're not used to living like this." I'd had enough. "Look, I'm sorry you're used to different, but this is what we can manage. Our budget doesn't stretch to luxuries." Frank, who'd been silent up till then, chimed in, his voice booming. "Then perhaps you need to reevaluate your budget, young lady. We're not animals to feed on scraps." Jack's jaw clenched. "Dad, that's enough. We're doing the best we can." The room was thick with tension, everyone's shoulders up around their ears. Finally, Helen huffed. "Fine. Tomorrow we'll give you a list of what we eat. You can make sure it's here." The next day, true to her word, Helen handed me a list. Marbled beef, fresh seafood, organic this, imported that. I looked at the list, my heart sinking. That evening, we sat down with Frank and Helen, the list between us on the kitchen table. We expect proper meals, steaks from marbled beef or the finest fish, Frank declared, as if it was the most normal request in the world. Jack and I exchanged shocked looks. We can't swing that, he said, his voice firm but weary. That's just not in our budget. Their response was swift and harsh. Lazy, both of you, Helen snapped. Can't even provide a decent meal. In the end, feeling cornered, I caved to their demands. I started buying only the highest quality products for them, while Jack and I got by on fast food, just to save costs. A month later, I sat down to crunch the numbers, and my heart nearly stopped. Our food expenses had doubled. And to top it off, Helen's daily luxurious baths had sent our water bill through the roof. Dinner had become a battlefield, but tonight was different. Frank and Helen were digging into some lavish dishes they'd insisted on buying, marbled steaks and imported fish. Meanwhile, Jack and I sat across from them, our plates filled with the simple pasta we could afford. The disparity wasn't just on our plates, it was drawing a deeper line between us every day. As they savored another bite of their expensive meals, I couldn't hold back any longer. This has got to stop, I said, the words heavy in the air. Helen looked up, her fork halfway to her mouth. What are you talking about now? We can't keep living like this. Eating separately, different meals, it's ridiculous. From now on, everyone in this house eats the same. And we're sticking to what we can afford. Frank laughed, a harsh sound that grated on my nerves. You expect us to eat that slop? It's not slop, it's dinner. It's what we eat. I shot back, my patience fraying. The laughter vanished from Frank's face, replaced by a scowl. Helen chimed in, her tone sharp and accusing. How can you be so greedy and lazy? Cooking decent food isn't that hard. They both turned to Jack, their expressions full of expectation. You're going to let her talk to us like this? In your own house? That was the last straw. Jack's hand slammed down on the table, making the plates jump. First off, this is Emma's house. And you will treat her with respect. The impact of his words hit hard. Helen's eyes filled with tears, her voice quivering. I never expected you to raise your voice at me, your own mother. Frank's anger boiled over as he stood, pointing an accusing finger at Jack. Look at you, henpecked and dancing to her tune. Is this what you've become? I stood my ground, though my heart was pounding. Enough. This conversation is over. From today, no more expensive steaks or fish. We eat the same, all of us. Their looks could have frozen the room. For a moment, no one moved, then, without a word, Frank and Helen pushed back from the table and left. Jack and I sat back down, the silence hanging heavy between us. He reached for my hand, squeezing it tight. I'm sorry it had to come to this. I am too, I replied, feeling the weight of the evening settle around us. But it's the right thing. We can't live like this. After the big blow-up at dinner, things cooled down, but only on the surface. Frank and Helen were quieter, sure, but there was a slyness to their silence that put me on edge. I had a feeling they weren't going to take the new house rules lying down, and I was right. It started subtly. A few days later, I was cleaning up after a lunch of sandwiches when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and headed to the front door, expecting maybe a package or a neighbor. But when I opened it, there stood a delivery guy holding a large, aromatic bag from some high-end restaurant in town. Delivery for Emma, he said, glancing at his clipboard. I was puzzled. There must be some mistake. I didn't order this. Just then, Helen appeared behind me, her smile a bit too wide. Oh, I took the liberty of ordering for us. I thought we deserved a nice meal after all the recent discomfort. I frowned, taking the bag hesitantly. Helen, we talked about this. We're cutting back on expenses. She shrugged, her eyes avoiding mine. I thought it was on your tab, dear. My mistake. Jack walked in from the kitchen, overhearing us. What's going on? Your mother decided we deserved an expensive lunch, I said, the weight of the bag in my hands suddenly feeling heavier. Jack's expression hardened. Mom, we agreed, no more of this. Frank stepped into the hallway, his voice booming. What's a little lunch going to hurt? You can't expect us to live like monks forever. I set the bag down on the entryway table, feeling the frustration bubble up. It's not just lunch. It's every meal, every extra expense we can't afford. We told you, we're sticking to a budget. Helen's face turned cold. Well, if you're going to make such a fuss over a simple meal, I suppose we won't bother next time. Jack pinched the bridge of his nose. It's not just about the meal, it's about respecting the rules of the house. You can't keep going behind our backs. The conversation went in circles for a few more minutes until Frank and Helen retreated to their room, leaving the uneaten, expensive lunch on the table. Jack and I looked at each other, the unspoken agreement hanging between us that this couldn't go on. I'll call the restaurant, explain the situation, and cancel any future orders made without our consent, I said, picking up the phone. Jack nodded, his jaw set. I'll talk to them again. This sneaky stuff has to stop. The peace was short-lived after the incident with the unauthorized lunch. Helen and Frank seemed to simmer just below the surface, and you could cut the tension in the house with a knife. I was washing dishes one evening when the calm shattered once again. Jack had just come in from the yard, looking weary. I was about to ask him about his day when the loud crash from the living room had us both running. We found Frank standing over a broken vase, one of the few decorations I really cared about. What happened here? Jack asked, trying to keep his voice level. It slipped, Frank said, barely looking regretful. Accidents happen. But his tone was all wrong. It wasn't apologetic, it was defiant. Jack bent down to pick up the pieces, and I couldn't help but say, this vase was from my grandmother. It's been here longer than I have. Helen scoffed from the doorway. It's just a vase. You can get another. That's not the point, Helen, I snapped, feeling my frustration rise. The point is respect, something that's clearly lacking here. You want to talk about respect? Frank shot back, his voice raising. What about respecting us? Treating us like second-class citizens in this house? Jack stood up, facing his father. You're living here by our goodwill, Dad. Remember that. It doesn't feel like goodwill. Helen chimed in, her words sharp. It feels like we're unwelcome. Every day felt like walking on a tightrope with Frank and Helen in our house, but one evening pushed me past my breaking point. We were sitting around the dinner table, the same place that had witnessed countless arguments now, when Helen casually dropped her latest bombshell. Jack, darling, I found this lovely coat today, and I think we should buy it using the college fund you've set up for Liam, she said, as if suggesting we switch brands of coffee. I choked on my water, coughing as I set my glass down hard on the table. What did you just say? I managed, my voice a mix of disbelief and rising anger. Helen smiled sweetly, clearly mistaking my shock for compliance. It's just money, dear. Liam can always take out loans for college. I really need a new coat. Jack, who'd been quietly seething beside me, slammed his fork down. Mom, that's out of the question. That money is for our son's education. We're not using it for anything else. Helen's face twisted into a scowl. How can you deny your own mother a simple request? It's not simple, and that's final, I snapped, feeling the last of my patience evaporate. Frank chimed in, his voice raised to a shout. You're both being unreasonable and cruel. We're your family. The threat came next, his voice cold and calculated. Maybe the local press would be interested to know how you treat your family. What about your bosses, huh? Would they like to know? I felt a mix of fury and fear churn in my stomach, but I knew we couldn't cave. Enough, I shouted back, standing up. This is not how family treats each other. You two need to find another place to live. This isn't working. Helen burst into tears, playing the victim, while Frank continued to hurl accusations and threats. The dinner ended with them storming out of the room, leaving Jack and me in stunned silence. Once the house was quiet, I retreated to the bedroom and dialed my grandmother. She picked up after a few rings, her voice a comforting presence. "Grandma, it's Emma," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "What's wrong, dear?" she asked, her tone immediately alert. I poured out everything, the demands, the threats, the impossible situation with Helen and Frank. She listened without interrupting, her quiet hums a steady reassurance in the background. When I finished, there was a brief pause. Then, decisively, she said, "I'll come to stay with you for a couple of months." "Are you sure, Grandma? What about the nursing home?" "I'm sure. It sounds like you need me there, and I'm not one to sit by when my family is in trouble," she declared, her voice resolute. When Grandma arrived, it was like a gust of fresh air swept through the house. She might have been older and moved a little slower, but her spirit was as fiery as ever. Frank and Helen were visibly put off by her sudden presence, their discomfort clear as day. "I'll be staying on the ground floor," Grandma declared firmly the moment she rolled through the door, her suitcase following behind her like a loyal companion. "I expect some things will need to be moved." Frank tried to mask his irritation with a forced smile. "Of course, we'll make you comfortable. Won't we, Helen?" Helen nodded stiffly, her eyes darting around, probably calculating what they'd need to shift or hide away. I couldn't help but feel a surge of relief. Finally, someone was putting them in their place. As soon as the movers finished rearranging the furniture to make room for Grandma, she called a family meeting in the living room. "Now, I've heard quite a bit from Emma about what's been going on here, and I'm not pleased," she began, her tone stern, cutting through any pretense of pleasantries. Frank opened his mouth to protest, but Grandma raised her hand, silencing him. "I'm not done. This house is still mine, technically. And while I've allowed Emma and Jack to live here without rent, that doesn't extend to you too." The blood drained from Helen's face. "You want us to pay rent?" she sputtered. "Yes, I do. $4,000 a month," Grandma stated flatly. "That's outrageous," Frank exclaimed, standing up from his chair. "We can't afford that." "Well, considering the costs you've been racking up here, I'd say you can afford to cut back on your luxuries," Grandma shot back. "But we're family," Helen tried, her voice quivering slightly. "Family doesn't exploit each other," Grandma countered. "Since you've been enjoying a lifestyle beyond your means on my granddaughter's dime, I think it's only fair." Frank and Helen were at a loss for words, exchanging glances as if looking for an out, but finding none. "And one more thing," Grandma continued. "If you think the rent is too high, you're welcome to find somewhere else to live. Or, if you decide to stay, you'll provide me with daily assistance. I need help getting around, meals prepared, and someone to ensure I'm taken care of." Helen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, her earlier bravado evaporated completely. Frank, who had always prided himself on his independence, looked like he'd been punched in the gut. "Think it over," Grandma finished, her voice softening just a tad. "I'll need your answer by tomorrow morning." As they retreated to their room, presumably to discuss their limited options, Grandma turned to us, her expression softening. "Don't you worry, kids. We'll sort this mess out." The morning after Grandma laid down her new house rules, it was like someone had flipped a switch in Frank and Helen. I walked into the kitchen to find them packing their things, a pile of boxes already forming at the door. "We've decided to move out," Frank announced, not looking up from the box he was sealing. "We found a small apartment. We'll take our things and go." Helen was quieter, busily stuffing things into bags, her movements sharp and quick. "It's for the best," she muttered, almost to herself, but loud enough for me to hear. The rest of the morning was a blur of activity. Boxes and furniture moved out the door. Jack helped, more out of a sense of duty than anything else. By mid-afternoon, their part of the house was eerily empty, the echo of their departure hanging in the air. Once they'd driven off, Grandma, who'd been watching quietly from her chair, gave me a knowing look. Well, that's that then. They'll be all right, you know. Sometimes a little hardship is needed to bring people back to earth. We found out later that they'd sold most of their belongings to cover the rent and their other debts. The luxurious life they were used to was trimmed down to essentials, much like their new apartment. Grandma stayed with us for 2 more weeks, a comforting presence in the house. But eventually, she decided it was time to return to her nursing home. Driving her back to the nursing home, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Thanks for everything, Grandma. We couldn't have managed without you. She waved off my thanks with a chuckle. Oh, nonsense. You're stronger than you think. Just remember to stand up for yourselves. No one else will do it for you. I hugged her goodbye, promising to visit soon. When I got home, the house seemed bigger, quieter. That night, we sat on our porch, the evening air cool and pleasant. Life had thrown us a curveball, but we had caught it, dealt with it, and were ready to move on. Whatever came next, we knew we could handle it together, with or without anyone else's approval. My name's Hannah, and if you ask me, my life's pretty standard. Got a decent job, a husband, Mark, who's been my rock since college, and 2 kids who are the usual blend of sweet and trouble. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that normalcy is a fragile thing, especially with a brother like Alex. Alex is 8 years younger than me, the kind of guy who never really grew up. Jobs, girlfriends, you name it, he changes them like he's flipping channels on TV. And yeah, he's got this habit of hitting up me or Mom whenever his wallet's feeling too light, which is always. So, there we were, at Mom's for our usual Sunday dinner. The house smelled like roast and the kids were running around, when the door slammed open like it's trying to break free. In strolls Alex, with this girl on his arm, looking like she just walked off a beach rather than into a family gathering. Her dress was so short, I swear Mark did a double take, nearly choked on his tea. Family, meet Lisa, Alex announces, all proud like he's won an award. My fiancé. And guess what? We're gonna have a baby. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Mark's coughing his lungs out, Mom's frozen with her mouth half open, and I'm just staring, thinking, here we go again. Alex, are you out of your damn mind? I couldn't help myself. You can barely take care of yourself. Lisa, hands on her hips, eyes me like I'm something she stepped in. We're very happy, thank you. And we don't need negativity, right, babe? Alex nods, slinging an arm around her. Yeah, we're doing great. Right, Mom? Mom, bless her, is trying to find her words. Congratulations. But, Alex, have you thought this through? A baby is a big responsibility. Of course, he hasn't, I muttered, earning a glare from both of them. Listen here, Hannah. Alex shot back. I don't need a lecture from you. We're gonna be fine. Right, Lisa? Lisa smirks. Absolutely. And we'll need a bit of help, obviously. Starting with living here for a while. I almost choked on my own spit. Live here? With Mom? Are you kidding? Why not? Lisa snapped. It's not like we have anywhere else to go. And it's not forever, just until Alex finds a new job. And when will that be? I couldn't stop the sarcasm. You planning on hitting the job hunt hard between gaming sessions, Alex? He just shrugged, all casual like. I'll figure it out. I always do. Mom finally spoke up, trying to smooth things over. Well, we'll make do. We always do. Right, Hannah? I looked at her, at the resignation in her eyes, and my heart sank. Yeah, Mom. We always do. Dinner was tense after that. Mark kept giving me these looks, like he was bracing for the storm he knew was coming. And me? I was just trying to wrap my head around the circus my life was about to become. After dinner, with the kids in bed and Mark helping Mom with the dishes, I cornered Alex in the living room. You can't keep doing this, you know. Dumping your problems on Mom on me. It's not fair. Alex, lounging like he owned the place, just shrugged. What do you want me to say, Hannah? Life's tough. I'm doing my best. Your best? I was fuming. Dragging a pregnant girl into this mess? Expecting everyone else to pick up your slack? Hey, Lisa yelled from the kitchen. Watch how you talk about us. I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. Arguing wasn't going to solve anything. Not with Alex. Not now. Just, try to think about someone other than yourself for once, I finally said, more tired than angry. Alex just looked at me, and for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of something like guilt. But then he smiled, that carefree, reckless smile that always spelled trouble. We'll manage, sis. We always do. As I went to help with the dishes, leaving Alex to his illusions, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all on the brink of something big. And not in a good way. But like Mom said, we'd make do. Because that's what families do, right? Even when they're about to be turned upside down by one of their own. Having Alex and Lisa move in was like inviting a hurricane into your house and hoping it'd just water the plants. From day one, the balance of our family home was thrown off. Mom tried to stay upbeat, but I could see the strain in her eyes. One morning, I dropped by to see Mom, and the scene was chaos. Dishes piled up, laundry forgotten, and Lisa lounging on the couch like she owned the place, scrolling through her phone. Alex was nowhere to be seen, probably asleep or pretending to be. Morning, Lisa, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Need help with anything? She barely glanced up. Oh, no, I'm good. Just resting. You know, for the baby. Right, the baby. I looked around at the mess. And Alex? She shrugged. Asleep, maybe? I don't keep tabs on him. Of course not. Why start now? I sighed and started picking up. Mom came in, her smile a bit too forced. Hannah, you don't have to do that. I don't mind, Mom. Can't have you dealing with all this alone. Lisa watched us, not moving an inch. You're so good to your mom, she said, and I couldn't tell if she was being sarcastic. Someone's got to be, I muttered, throwing a glance her way. She just smiled, unfazed. Later, I caught Alex in the kitchen, raiding the fridge. Nice of you to join the living, I snapped. Your fiancé's made herself right at home. He grabbed a soda, not looking at me. Yeah, well, she's pregnant. Needs to rest. And you? What's your excuse? He leaned against the counter, all casual-like. I'm looking for work, all right? It's not easy out there. Could have fooled me. Seems like your full-time job is avoiding responsibility. He rolled his eyes, cracking open his soda. Why you always gotta be on my case, Hannah? I'm handling it. By handling, you mean letting Mom clean up after you too? He didn't have an answer to that. Just sipped his soda and shrugged. The final straw came when Lisa announced they wanted a small wedding at the house. Nothing fancy, she said, laying out plans that sounded anything but. Just something memorable. I looked at Mom, who was trying to hide her worry. And how do you plan to pay for this small wedding? Alex jumped in. We thought Mom could help, you know, as a gift. I laughed. It was that or scream. You're joking, right? You want more from her? Lisa stood up, hands on her hips. It's not like we're asking for much. Just a little help. A little help? I was fuming now. You've done nothing but take since you got here. Mom's on a fixed income and you're planning a wedding like she's made of money. Alex tried to intervene. Hannah, come on, it's just... No, Alex. Enough is enough. You two need to start taking responsibility for your own lives. Mom's not your personal ATM. Lisa's face went red, and for a moment, I thought she'd yell. But she just scoffed. Fine, We'll figure it out ourselves. Yeah, I said. You do that. Walking out, I told Mom, don't let them bully you into paying for anything. It's time they learned the value of money. Mom nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to help Alex, but knew it wasn't helping in the long run. That night, Mark and I talked it over. You can't keep fighting their battles, Hannah, he said, and I knew he was right. But it wasn't just about fighting battles, it was about protecting Mom from being taken advantage of. The next day, I made it clear to Alex and Lisa. You're adults. It's time to act like it. No more handouts. You want a wedding, a life, you work for it. Their response was a mix of shock and anger, but I stood firm. This was the wake-up call they needed, whether they appreciated it or not. The addition of a new family member should have been a joyous occasion, and in a way, it was. Lisa gave birth to a beautiful boy, a bundle of joy that brought a rare smile to everyone's faces, especially Mom's. She was over the moon, completely taken with her new grandson. But the joy was a double-edged sword. It was Mom, not Alex or Lisa, who ended up doing most of the caring for the little one. Watching her juggle her grandson alongside everything else was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. Alex and Lisa's approach to parenting was, let's just say, hands off. While Mom cooed and cuddled the baby, Alex was glued to his computer screen, and Lisa was out more often than not, treating the mall like her personal playground. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Life at Mom's had spiraled into a daily soap opera, minus the scripted resolution at the end of each episode. On one of my visits, I caught Mom poring over a pile of receipts that could easily be mistaken for a novel, with expenses that made my eyes water. Designer outfits, jewelry, luxury items that screamed extravagance from miles away. And there was Alex, ensconced in his virtual world, oblivious to the real one crumbling around him, his newborn son a mere background to his gaming adventures. Alex, isn't it about time you hit pause and maybe, I don't know, looked for a job? My attempt at lightheartedness did nothing to pierce his focus. He grunted something unintelligible, not once tearing his gaze from the screen. Working on it, he mumbled, the same old song and dance. And Lisa? This, I gestured to the mountain of receipts, isn't exactly helping. He shrugged, a gesture that conveyed a universe of indifference. I rounded on Mom. How can you just sit by and watch them drain you like this? Mom sighed, a sound so heavy it seemed to carry the weight of the world. It's only money, Hannah. I can't lose my grandson over it. That's when Lisa waltzed in, arms laden with shopping bags, a triumphant grin plastered across her face. Nothing like a little retail therapy, she announced, dropping her spoils on the table as if she'd returned from a successful hunt. Therapy? More like grand larceny. Mom can't keep this up, Lisa. Her eyes narrowed to slits, her voice cold and sharp as ice. Perhaps we should just leave, then. Let's see how often Mom gets to see her grandson after that. The threat hung in the air, a toxic cloud that threatened to choke us all. I looked to Mom for a sign of outrage, but she met my gaze with a resigned shake of her head, a silent plea to drop it. Later, in the sanctuary of the kitchen, I tried again. You can't let them use you like this, Mom. It's not right. She continued her tea ritual, a calming contrast to the storm brewing in my chest. I know, dear. But what choice do I have? That's my grandson. There has to be a line, Mom. They're walking all over you. She handed me a cup of tea, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity one rarely saw. I'll handle it, Hannah. Trust me, I've got this under control. Control? The word tasted bitter. Seems more like they're controlling you. She patted my hand, a gesture meant to soothe. Just trust me, dear. As I left, the image of Alex lost in another world while Lisa admired her latest shiny trinket, not at me. Mom might think she had a handle on things, but from where I stood, it looked like we were all being dragged down by their weight. The trouble started when Mom got sick out of nowhere. One day she was fine, the next, she was rushed to the hospital with what turned out to be a serious condition. I was there in a heartbeat, barely had time to grab my purse before I was out the door. The hospital became my second home, sitting by her bed, holding her hand, and praying she'd pull through. I called Alex, tried to get through to him and Lisa, telling them, "Mom's sick, she's in the hospital. You need to come, now." But all I got back were excuses. "We're a bit tied up right now, Hannah. You know how it is," Alex would say, or Lisa would chime in with, "We've got plans already. Can't just drop everything." Plans. Right. Their social calendar was apparently more important than their sick mother lying in a hospital bed. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't understand how they could just carry on with their lives, partying and living it up, while Mom was fighting for hers. I was running on fumes, between my job, the kids, and now this. But I didn't have the luxury of being tied up or having plans. Mom needed me, so that's where I was. Every day, hoping for some improvement, for her to wake up and tell me everything would be okay. 2 months of this hell, and then, just as sudden as she fell ill, she was gone. I was there, holding her hand, telling her I loved her, that I'd look after everything, not to worry. And where were Alex and Lisa? Out. Living their life without a care in the world, not even bothering to see if Mom, or their son for that matter, needed them. The funeral was a blur of faces, condolences, and the overwhelming feeling of loss. But Lisa, in her barely there black dress, managed to stand out, drawing disapproving looks and whispers from everyone. Alex was just as detached, showing no sign of grief, almost as if he was relieved it was all over. The day after, I went to Mom's house, needing to feel her presence, but I was met with Lisa's sneering face. "Looking for something, Hannah?" she mocked, blocking the doorway. "I need to get some of Mom's things," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, I think you're mistaken. This is our house now. You have no business here," she replied, smirking. Alex came up behind her, a smug look on his face. "Yeah, Hannah, Mom changed her will. Everything's ours now. Maybe you should have spent less time at the hospital and more time securing your inheritance." I was speechless, anger and disbelief swirling inside me. "You can't be serious. Mom wouldn't do that." He shrugged, enjoying every moment of my distress. "Believe what you want. But you're not welcome here." Lisa laughed, enjoying the spectacle. "Guess you should have been nicer to us, huh?" Their cruelty hit me hard, but I wasn't about to show them how much. "We'll see what the notary says about this," I managed to say, my voice cold. "Good luck with that," Alex called out as I walked away, their laughter echoing behind me. A week after the whole funeral drama, we all ended up in the notary's office, a place I never thought I'd be fighting a family battle. The air was thick with tension, you could cut it with a knife. Alex and Lisa were smirking like they already won the lottery, but I had a card up my sleeve they didn't see coming. The notary cleared his throat, and the room went dead silent. "The will Mr. Alex Kramer has been referring to," he began, eyeing my brother, "is not the final will. Your mother made another visit here, with Hannah, to draft the final document." Lisa's face turned a shade I didn't know existed. "What the hell does that mean?" she spat, her voice like venom. "It means," I said, my voice steady, "that Mom knew better. She left the house to me, not you two." The notary nodded. "Indeed. The house goes to Hannah." Alex jumped up, his face red. "That's bullshit. She wouldn't do that." Lisa was on her feet too, screaming insults at me that would make a sailor blush. The notary raised his hand, calling for silence. "There's more. If it's found that there was any pressure applied to change the will, legal actions could be taken." Alex, still fuming, shot back, "I'm her son too. I deserve half of everything." The notary, unfazed, pulled out another document. "Your mother anticipated such a claim. Hence, she divided her money into 2 equal parts. However," he paused, looking directly at Alex, She deducted from your share all the money you and your wife have received during your marriage. You could hear a pin drop. How much is left then? Alex's voice was barely a whisper. $10,000, the notary replied. Lisa's scream could probably be heard a mile away. 10,000? That's it? I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and relief. Mom had seen through their greed. Seems like Mom knew what she was doing, I said, more to myself than anyone else. Alex and Lisa were in shock, their dreams of easy money shattered in an instant. The notary suggested they leave before things got uglier, and they did, but not before throwing a few more choice words my way. After the showdown at the notary, things escalated pretty quick. Alex and his wife, Lisa, were set on clinging to Mom's house like they owned the place. It was a mess, a proper circus show, until it got so heated that I had no choice but to call the cops. Never thought I'd see the day where I'd have to drag police into family drama, but there we were. When they finally left, under the watchful eyes of the police, the air in the house felt different, heavier somehow. Mark and I started the grim task of taking inventory, noting the gaps where things used to be. It was clear as day, they'd been selling off Mom's things. My heart sank. How could they? I was livid, ready to drag them through the courts. I can't believe this, Mark. They've stolen from us, from Mom. We should sue them for everything they've got left. Mark, ever the voice of reason, put a hand on my shoulder. Hannah, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But think about it. Maybe, just maybe, they'll use that money for something good. For the kid. His words hit me harder than I expected. It was a slim hope, clinging to the idea that maybe, just maybe, they'd finally start acting like responsible adults for their child's sake. It didn't make what they did right, but it gave me a sliver of hope that maybe the cycle would break with their son. Deep down, I knew Mark was right. Pursuing them legally would just drag us all through more mud, and for what? The chance at a few dollars and more heartache? No, it was time to let go, to move forward and focus on healing, on building something better from the wreckage they left behind. So, I let it go, not for them, but for me, for us. It was time to close this chapter and start anew, with the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd find their way. Months rolled by in silence, a welcome break from the chaos that had enveloped our lives. But peace has a way of being fleeting. Word got to me that Alex and Lisa had sunk further, living in some rundown apartment, scraping by. Alex was jumping from one odd job to the next, and Lisa? She was chasing after rich men, leaving their little boy, my nephew, pretty much on his own. Hearing that, it felt like a punch to the gut. That kid deserved better, so much better than what those two could ever offer him. I started gathering the paperwork, the legal documents needed to strip them of their parental rights. It was a heavy decision, but every fiber of my being told me it was the right one. That boy needed a real family, stability, and I was determined to give it to him. When I finally approached Alex and Lisa with the idea, bracing for a fight, their reaction took me by surprise. They were indifferent. Almost relieved to be rid of the responsibility. "You sure about this, Hannah?" Alex asked, no hint of the brother I once knew in his eyes. "You know, taking on a kid is a lot." I couldn't hide my disgust, my disappointment. "He's your son, Alex. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Lisa, ever the opportunist, chimed in with a shrug. "If you think you can give him a better life, then why not? We've got our own lives to figure out." Their casual dismissal of their flesh and blood boiled my blood, but I swallowed the anger. This was about him, not them. "Yeah, I'm sure. More than you've ever been about anything. He'll be loved and cared for. That's more than what you've ever offered him." The paperwork was straightforward, their signatures quick and emotionless. As I walked away, documents in hand, it was a bittersweet victory. That little boy was going to have a chance now, a real family with me and Mark. It's been a stretch of quiet months, a silence from Alex and Lisa that spoke volumes. They vanished off the grid, no calls answered, no trace of them at their last known spot. I've toyed with the idea of getting the authorities involved, wondering if a missing poster is the next step. Meanwhile, our home's been filled with a different kind of noise, the joyful chaos of kids and their boundless energy. Our little nephew, now effectively my third child, has settled in as if he's always been here. My kids, bless them, have taken to him like ducks to water, showering him with the kind of love and attention that's both heartwarming and a tad overwhelming. "We're gonna build the biggest fort this living room has ever seen," declares my eldest, rallying the troops with a sparkle in her eyes that could outshine the sun. The little one, barely understanding but eager all the same, claps his hands with glee, a toothy grin plastered across his face. "Fort, fort," he echoes, stumbling over the words, but clear in his enthusiasm. Mark and I, we've moved into Mom's old house, a sprawling place that seemed too vast once, but now feels just right. There's a room for every mood, a space for every laughter, and a corner for every whispered secret. It's become a home in the truest sense, filled with memories we're making fresh each day. "I never thought we'd fill this place up," I muse aloud one evening, watching the kids turn the living room into a labyrinth of cushions and blankets. Mark wraps an arm around me, pulling me close. "We always had the space, just needed the right people to fill it." And he's right. This house, once echoing with the past, now thrums with the present and whispers promises of the future. As for Alex and Lisa, their absence is a void, but not one that sucks the life out of us. If anything, it's given us a clarity, a purpose. We've built something solid, something real, out of the wreckage they left behind. We've turned a page, started a new chapter. And in this story, we're all exactly where we're meant to be. I'm Ella, knee-deep in the world of fashion and celebs, juggling brushes and eyeshadow palettes like a pro. My life's a whirlwind of glitz, but underneath the foundation and the flash, I'm just a girl who stumbled into love when I least expected it. It was one of those rare nights off. I almost skipped the bash at Jenna's, thinking about crashing on my couch with some takeout. But fate had other plans. That's where I met Daniel. He was no movie star, but man, did he have that charm. First thing he said to me? "Wow, do they serve drinks here, or do I gotta flirt with you to get one?" I laughed, despite myself. "Try flirting, see where it gets you." And flirt we did, the whole night. Between the laughs and the banter, I felt like I'd known him forever. He wasn't in the biz, worked some tech job, but that night, none of it mattered. Fast forward through a whirlwind romance, and bam, we're hitched. The wedding was something out of a movie, thanks to my connections and his charm. Then came the house, a gift from my folks. "It's too much," I told them. "Nothing's too much for our little girl," my dad said, his arm around Mom, both of them beaming. Daniel was over the moon about the place. "Babe, this house, it's unreal. Look at that garden. And the terrace? Can't wait to chill there with a beer at sunset." The first few months flew by in a blur of happiness. Mornings on the terrace, evenings tangled up on the couch, it was like living in a dream. "I could get used to this," Daniel whispered one night, kissing my forehead. "Better not get too used to it. Remember, we gotta pay the bills too," I joked, nudging him playfully. "With you, babe, I'd live in a cardboard box. But this," he gestured around at our lavish living room, "this is a nice bonus." Our conversations were simple, filled with plans for the weekend, teasing each other, or deciding what masterpiece we'd attempt to cook up for dinner. "You know, I could get used to your terrible cooking," Daniel would say, dodging the dish towel I threw at him. "Terrible? You were begging for seconds last night," I'd retort, trying to keep a straight face. It was real, it was us. No pretense, no filters. Just Ella and Daniel against the world. Or so I thought. Life was rolling smooth until it wasn't. Daniel started missing dinners, his side of the bed cold when I'd crash late at night. "Work's a beast, babe," he'd text, the same excuse on repeat. One evening, I waited up, the clock ticking past midnight. The door creaked open, and there he was, looking like a mess. "Work again?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Yeah, you know how it is," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "No, I don't, Daniel. My friends get off work at decent hours. What's so special about yours?" He shrugged, a tired smile not reaching his eyes. "Just projects, babe. Big ones." I let it slide, not wanting to start a fight. But the seed of doubt? It was planted, watered by whispers and late nights. Then came the bomb. Jenna, always the gossip queen, cornered me at the gym. "Ella, girl, you didn't hear it from me, but Daniel's been cozying up to someone." I laughed it off. "Yeah, right. Daniel? He can't even flirt without tripping over his words." "Suit yourself. Just saying, eyes open." The words gnawed at me, festering into a confrontation one night. "So, who's she?" I spat, my patience worn thin. Daniel looked like I'd slapped him. "Who's who? What the hell, Ella? Don't play dumb. You're screwing around, aren't you?" His face turned red, anger and something else, guilt, flashing in his eyes. "I'm busting my ass at work for us, and this is what I get. Accusations? We both know you're lying. Just admit it." He slammed his fist on the table, making me jump. "Fine. You want the truth? I've been working late. No affair, no mystery woman. Just work." I wanted to believe him, God, I did. But the lies were there, hidden behind late returns and missed calls. We yelled, threw accusations like grenades, our love caught in the crossfire. "Maybe we rushed into this," I shouted, tears blurring my vision. "Maybe we did," he shot back, his voice cold. Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Thoughts of divorce danced in my head, a bitter end to a sweet start. But love, it's a stubborn thing. We sought help, clutching at straws, desperate to save what was left. A family psychologist, Dr. Lisa, became our referee, calling out fouls and starting plays. "Why are you two here?" she asked, notepad ready. "We're fighting. A lot," I started, my voice small. Daniel chimed in. "I work late, and she thinks I'm having an affair." Dr. Lisa looked between us. "Is that all?" We nodded, the room heavy with unsaid words. "Okay, let's unpack this. Ella, why do you feel he's cheating?" "Because he's never home. And when he is, it's like he's not really here." "And Daniel, your side?" "I'm trying to provide for us." But she doesn't see that. She only sees what she wants. The sessions were tough, each word a step through a minefield. But slowly, we started finding our way back to each other, learning to trust, to talk. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "Think we can make it?" I asked one night, our hands tentatively linked. Daniel squeezed my hand. "Yeah, babe. We're gonna make it." We were battered, maybe a little broken, but together. And at that moment, it felt like enough. After all the turmoil and heartache, I started believing that maybe, just maybe, a baby could bridge the gap between Daniel and me. It was a desperate thought, but hope has a way of blooming in desperate soil. However, getting pregnant turned out to be a journey of its own. Turns out, I had some issues on my end, a kind of cruel irony, given our situation. It took 6 long, grueling years of trying, hoping, and countless doctor's visits before I finally saw those 2 pink lines. I was over the moon, filled with a happiness so intense it was almost terrifying. This baby, our baby, was a symbol of hope, a testament to perseverance. I couldn't wait to tell Daniel, imagining his joy mirroring mine. But when I shared the news, his reaction was like a splash of cold water on my face. "Oh, that's great," he said, his voice flat, his smile forced. It was as if I'd told him the weather forecast, not that we were going to be parents. I couldn't hide my disappointment. "Great? You don't seem excited," I accused, feeling my own excitement dim. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I am, Ella. It's just a lot to take in, you know? I mean, a kid? We're going to be parents? Yeah, I know. It's scary, but it's also amazing, isn't it? I tried to find the enthusiasm in his eyes, but found none. He nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, amazing. The conversation felt like hitting a brick wall. I'd imagined this moment differently in my head. Dreamed of it, even. But reality has a funny way of knocking you down a peg or two. Despite the awkward start, I clung to the hope that a baby would bring us even closer, seal the cracks that had formed in our marriage. We need to think about the future, Daniel. For our baby, I said, hoping to ignite some spark of excitement in him. He agreed, though his enthusiasm felt as forced as his smile. Of course, we'll figure it out. We always do. As the weeks passed, my belly grew, but the distance between us remained. Daniel tried, I could see that. He'd come home earlier, ask about my appointments, and even painted the nursery without complaint. But something was off. It was like he was going through the motions, doing what he thought was expected of him, not what he wanted. And then our miracle was born, and I was not up to it. Life with a newborn should have been about diaper changes, midnight feedings, and those quiet moments of wonder watching your baby sleep. Instead, it felt like I was living with a ghost. The whole cycle started again, like a bad rerun of a show you hated but couldn't stop watching. Daniel turned back into the man I feared would reappear. His promises to change, to be present, felt like empty words, vanishing into thin air the moment they were spoken. Late nights at work became his new norm, each excuse more elaborate than the last. First, once a week, then almost every day. Work's crazy, babe. You know how it is, he'd say, his voice a rehearsed tape I'd played too many times in my head. One night, as I rocked our son to sleep, I heard the front door creak open. It was late, way past when normal people finish work. I waited for Daniel to come upstairs, to sneak a peek at his sleeping son or even attempt a whispered apology for missing yet another bedtime. But there was nothing. Just the soft snuffle of our baby and the distant sound of the TV flicking on downstairs. I couldn't stand it. Wrapping our son a little tighter in his blanket, I made my way downstairs, ready for a confrontation. I found Daniel sprawled on the couch, eyes glued to some late-night show. Really, Daniel? Another late night? This is becoming a habit, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, not wanting to wake the baby. He glanced at me, irritation flickering across his face. What do you want me to say, Ella? That I'm out partying? I'm working, for God's sake. Working? Or avoiding us? The words spilled out, bitter and sharp. Daniel stood up, his expression hard. You think I don't want to be here? With my son? There was a challenge in his voice, but it didn't reach his eyes. I don't know what to think anymore, Daniel. You're never here. And when you are, you're not really with us. My voice broke, a mix of anger and desperation. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm trying, Ella. You think I don't know I'm screwing up? But what do you want from me? I want you to be a father, to be present. Not just a guest in your own home. I was shouting now, the frustration of the past weeks, months, boiling over. Daniel looked away, the fight going out of him. I'm sorry. I'll try harder, I promise. Promises. We'd had plenty of those. Yet, as I looked into his face, searching for something, anything, to cling to, I realized I wanted to believe him. For our son, for us, I had to believe him. Okay. I whispered, more to myself than to him. But we can't keep going like this. We need to make some changes. 2 more months have passed, and Daniel's work has not gone away. His promises to change, to be present, felt like empty words, vanishing into thin air the moment they were spoken. Late nights at work became his new norm, each excuse more elaborate than the last. One night, I couldn't stand the silence, the doubt eating away at me. I confronted him, my voice laced with a tiredness that went beyond sleepless nights with a newborn. Are you seeing someone else, Daniel? His reaction was swift, a mix of anger and indignation that felt too rehearsed. What? No. How can you even say that? I'm working my ass off for this family. His denial was strong, his gaze steady, but so was the pit in my stomach, growing with every word he said. I wanted to believe him, to wipe the slate clean and start fresh, but history and intuition screamed a warning I couldn't ignore. I nodded, a brittle smile plastered on my face. Okay, I believe you. The words tasted like ash. I was lying to him, to myself. Pretending to trust when every fiber of my being screamed that I was being played for a fool, again. The day everything came crashing down started like any other, except for a message that popped up on my social media. A message from a woman I didn't know, claiming she was Daniel's lover. My first reaction was disbelief, a cold laugh escaping me as I thought, this has to be some sick joke. But curiosity, that gnawing worm, drove me to her profile, and that's when the floor fell out from under me. Pictures of her and Daniel, looking cozy and way too familiar, smiles that I hadn't seen directed at me in months. And the kids, 3 little faces that bore an unsettling resemblance to the man I called my husband. My heart wasn't just broken, it was obliterated. I didn't confront him over the phone or blast him with angry texts. No, I waited. I waited with a storm brewing inside me, the photos burning a hole through my phone. When he walked through the door that night, the air was thick with my rage, a silent tension that made him pause. Ella? What's wrong? Daniel asked, already on edge as he saw the look on my face. Without a word, I slid my phone across the table to him, the photos displayed like evidence at a crime scene. His face went white, his eyes flicking between the screen and me, searching for an explanation where there was none. Ella, I can explain, he started, the words choking in his throat as he tried to piece together a defense out of lies. Explain? Explain what, Daniel? How you have another family? How you lied to us every day? My voice was sharp, a blade honed by betrayal. He attempted to touch the phone, perhaps to delete the evidence or simply out of a reflex to hide his guilt. It's not like that. It's complicated. Complicated? I laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. I think it's pretty simple. You cheated. You lied. You led a double life at the expense of our family. What's complicated about that? Daniel's face was a mask of desperation, the reality of his choices finally hitting him. Ella, please. I made a mistake. I can fix this. Fix this? How, Daniel? By pretending those kids don't exist? By erasing what you did? The absurdity of it all fueled my anger. I don't know. But I want to make things right. His voice was barely a whisper, a plea for a mercy he didn't deserve. Right? There's no right here, Daniel. Only wrong. And you chose that path, not me. My voice was steady now, the decision clear in my heart. He opened his mouth to say something else, maybe another excuse or a promise he couldn't keep, but I was done. I want you out, Daniel. Out of this house. Out of our lives. The resignation in his eyes told me he knew it was over. He packed a bag, his movements slow, like he was still processing the end of everything we had. As he stood at the door, a pathetic figure clutching a duffel bag of lies, he looked back at me. Ella, just go. My interruption was final, the closing of a book I never wanted to read again. And with that, he left, the silence of the house a heavy blanket around me. It was over, the end of a chapter one never saw coming. But in that moment, I knew it was just the beginning of something else for me. A few days later, there was a pounding at the door, so fierce it made me jump. I barely had time to react before she barged in, the woman from the photos, with Daniel cowering behind her like a child caught stealing candy. She wasted no time, strutting through my home like she owned the place, eyeing every room with a calculating gaze. Daniel wouldn't meet my eye, his shame a tangible thing that filled the room even more than his mistress's arrogance. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes cold. You need to leave. Take your kid and go. A tiny apartment should be enough for the two of you. I stared at her, disbelief and anger warring inside me. Excuse me? She crossed her arms, smirking. You heard me. I have 3 kids with him. We need this house more than you do. I glanced at Daniel, expecting him to say something, anything. But he remained silent, a spectator in his own life's destruction. And you'll be leaving by next week, she added, as if announcing a change in the weather, not uprooting my entire life. As they left, Daniel not daring to say a word, the absurdity and audacity of the situation sank in. The woman who helped break my marriage now wanted to take my home, too. It was surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. A week had dragged by, and as promised, the doorbell rang with an urgency that only someone deluded enough to think they owned the place would have. Opening the door, I found them, the unlikely duo, Daniel's mistress, oozing false confidence, and Daniel, looking like a man who'd lost at his own game. You're still here? The mistress spat out, her eyes darting around, taking in the unchanged scene within. Why wouldn't I be? It's my house. I shot back, leaning against the doorway, finding strength in my stance. Her eyes flickered to Daniel, seeking some kind of affirmation. He, with a shrug that carried the weight of his lies, managed to mumble, "We bought this house together after the wedding. It's as much mine as it is yours." I couldn't help but laugh. It was either that or scream. Bought? My parents gifted this house to me. Your name's nowhere on it. It's mine, always has been. The shock on his face was almost comical. The mistress, too, looked as if I'd slapped her with the truth. But, the house? No buts. It's mine. And him. I gestured towards Daniel with a disdainful flick of my wrist. Thinking he could lay claim to it is laughable. She tried a different tactic then, her pride bruised, but not beaten. Well, you may have the house, but I have him. A rich man with a hefty salary. I burst out laughing. The absurdity of the situation demanded it. Rich? Hefty salary? He's been playing you. He's a clerk, always has been. There's no wealth there. She turned to Daniel, her face a mask of disbelief and anger. Is this true? Daniel, the color draining from his face, nodded, his earlier bravado evaporating into thin air. I might have exaggerated a bit about my job. A bit? The fury in her voice was a clear warning signal. She turned her wrath towards me, as if I were the one who'd lied to her. Without another word, she stormed off, Daniel trailing behind her like a lost puppy, his shoulders slumped in defeat. 2 weeks after I kicked Daniel out and stood my ground against his mistress's absurd claim to my house, I took the next logical step. I filed for divorce. It was time to officially sever the ties that bound me to a man who'd become a stranger, a source of betrayal and pain. I wanted freedom, a clean slate for me and my son. Just when I thought I could catch a breath, she was back on my doorstep, the mistress, her desperation palpable, 3 kids in tow looking every bit as miserable as she was. Please, she started, her eyes brimming with tears. You have to help us. We have nowhere to go. This house, it's all they have. I stared at her, incredulous. Was she serious? After everything, she had the gall to show up here, demanding my home? The audacity, I muttered under my breath. Listen, and listen good. This house is mine. You and Daniel made your bed. Now, lie in it. Somewhere else. Her tears quickly evaporated, replaced by a scorching anger. How can you be so heartless? Look at them. She pushed the kids forward, their tears starting on cue. I sighed, my heart heavy for the kids, but my resolve steel. This isn't my doing. It's yours. It's his. You need to leave. Now. When she didn't budge, just stood there screaming accusations and curses, I had no choice. I called the police. The situation was beyond ridiculous, beyond sad. It was a circus, and I was done being a spectator. The officers arrived swiftly, their presence a relief. They tried to reason with her, but she was beyond reason, her tirade against me escalating. Eventually, they escorted her and the children away. The sight of them being led from my doorstep was both a relief and a pang in my heart. Those kids deserved better. Just when I thought I had started to turn the page, Daniel showed up again, knocking on my door with a look that was half regret, half desperation. I opened the door, not surprised, but disappointed to see him standing there, a bag in his hand, his eyes pleading. Ella, I messed up. I know that. But I've left all that behind. I want to come back, for you, for our son. Can you forgive me? His voice was shaky, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. I stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. After everything, he thought he could just waltz back in? Forgive you? My voice was low, laced with venom. After you lied, cheated, and broke our family? You think you can just drop them and everything's fine? He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes not meeting mine. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to make things right. Make things right? I laughed, harsh and cold. You're beyond making things right, Daniel. You made your choice. Now, live with it. His face fell, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Ella, please. No. It's too late for pleases and sorries. You need to leave. Now. My voice was firm, brooking no argument. He looked at me, the realization finally dawning on him that there was no going back, no forgiveness to be had. With a heavy sigh, he turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. As he disappeared from view, a part of me felt lighter. It was finally over. I was free from the web of lies and betrayal Daniel had spun around us. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Daniel and his mistress were crammed into a small apartment, their lives a constant battle, a far cry from the illusions he'd tried to sell to both of us. It was a fitting end, I thought, to a tale of deceit. As for me, I focused on my son, on rebuilding our lives without the shadow of Daniel hanging over us. We were moving on, stepping into a future that was uncertain, but ours to shape. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. We had survived the storm, and now, it was time to enjoy the calm. My life was pretty straightforward until Jake came along. I was a fitness trainer at a local gym, spending my days helping folks shape up, which kept me busy enough not to dwell on the lack of drama in my personal life. That all changed the day Jake walked into my gym. Hey, I'm looking to switch up my routine. Got any killer moves to start with? He asked, his tone light but his gaze intense. I gave him a once-over. He wasn't the usual newbie, unsure of which machine to try first. No, he looked like he knew his way around a gym, but was here for something more. Sure, I replied, leading him to a set of weights. Let's see what you've got. That first session turned into a week, then a month, and our casual chats grew longer and more personal. Jake owned a small family restaurant, famous for its authentic Italian dishes. It's all about the sauce, he'd say, and nobody makes it like my mom. He talked about his mother with a mix of admiration and frustration, a combo that hinted at deep family ties. One afternoon, as we wrapped up a particularly intense workout, he caught me off guard. Listen, Emily, I've been thinking. How about dinner at my place? You can meet my mom and try that sauce I keep bragging about. I hesitated, more out of surprise than disinterest. Yeah, why not? I'm curious if it's as good as you claim. Dinner was cozy, the food incredible, and the company surprisingly comfortable. His mother, Anna, was all warm smiles and hearty laughs, though her eyes seemed to size me up with every glance. His younger sister, Sophia, dropped by too, her presence more prickly, her words sharp and quick. So, Emily, Jake tells us you're quite the fitness guru, Sophia said, a smirk playing on her lips as she eyed the muscles I worked hard to build. Ever deal with hopeless cases, or do you just make the fit fitter? I chuckled, taking her jab in stride. I believe everyone has potential. It's all about finding the right motivation. Jake was a constant during those early days, always showing up at the gym at the same time, always finding a reason to talk a little longer. You know, I never believed in fate or any of that stuff, he confessed one evening as we closed up the gym together. But meeting you? Maybe I was wrong. His words were a mix of rough charm and clumsy sincerity. It was refreshing, and despite the nagging voice in my head warning me to take it slow, I found myself falling for him. Hard and fast, like a rookie taking on too much weight without a spotter. One chilly evening, as we walked to our cars, he stopped and faced me, his expression serious. "Emily, I'm not good at this fancy talking, and I don't have a smooth line to throw your way. But I like you, a lot. What do you say we make this official?" It was abrupt and straightforward. No games, no dancing around the subject. That was Jake, direct and all in. I smiled, my heart hammering in my chest. "I say, yes. Let's see where this goes." And just like that, I was no longer just the fitness trainer at the local gym. I was Jake's girlfriend, and soon enough, his wife. Moving into Jake's mom's house right after we got married wasn't exactly what I had pictured for our happily ever after. Jake told me it was important to him because of his family ties, but living with his mom, Anna, and his sister, Sophia, was tough from the start. They didn't hide their displeasure about me joining the family, and things got tenser day by day. The house was always bustling, and somehow I ended up with more than my fair share of chores. After long hours at the gym, I'd come home to an endless list of tasks. The old washing machine was a nightmare. It broke down so often that I half joked it had something personal against me. But nobody else seemed to notice or care, especially not Anna or Sophia. I remember one evening after dinner, I was trying to fix that blasted machine again, and I could hear them in the kitchen. "She doesn't even know what she's doing," Sophia laughed, not bothering to lower her voice. "Watch, she'll flood the basement next." Their laughter echoed down the hallway, stinging more than I wanted to admit. I bit my tongue, focusing on the task at hand. It wasn't just the washing machine, it was everything. From cooking to cleaning, my efforts were just another source of entertainment for them. Cooking was the worst. Italian cuisine was sacred in this house, and my attempts were apparently blasphemous. I tried to follow Anna's recipes to the letter, but nothing seemed to work. One night, as I struggled with a supposedly simple pasta dish, Sophia hovered in the doorway. "Is that supposed to look like that?" she asked, a smirk playing on her lips. "It's nothing like Mom's." I gritted my teeth, stirring the sauce that just wouldn't thicken. "Well, I'm trying my best here." Sophia snorted. "Maybe your best isn't good enough. Did you ever think of that?" I wanted to snap back, to defend myself, but what was the point? It wouldn't change anything. Jake, whenever he was around, seemed to shrink a little more each time his sister or mother criticized me. He never stood up for me, his silence was as loud as their laughs. "Hey, Emily, just leave it," Jake would say quietly later, trying to avoid any confrontation. "It's not worth it." Dinner times were an ordeal. I'd set the dishes on the table, hoping for a peaceful meal, but it was like sitting down in a lion's den. "You know, in Italy, they'd probably ban you from the kitchen for this," Anna would joke as she tasted my food, the others chuckling along. "Yeah, maybe stick to what you know, gym stuff," Sophia would add, passing the salt like it was a peace offering I didn't deserve. I would nod, smile, and swallow the hurt, my frustration simmering like the sauce that never turned out right. Living with Jake's family made every day feel like a battle I wasn't prepared for. As my pregnancy progressed, the house chores, which already felt like they were all on me, became even more demanding. Instead of getting any help or understanding from Anna and Sophia, I felt their hostility grow stronger. One afternoon, I was trying to vacuum the living room, moving slower than usual, because of my growing belly. Anna walked in, watched me for a moment, and then let out a sigh that seemed to carry all her disapproval. "Emily, you missed a spot over there. And look at how slow you're moving. This house is going to fall apart at this rate," she said, pointing at a corner I hadn't gotten to yet. I straightened up, feeling the strain in my back. "I'm doing the best I can, Anna. It's a bit harder with the baby." She just sked and shook her head. "In my time, we didn't let a little thing like pregnancy slow us down. You need to toughen up." The lack of sympathy stung, and I bit my tongue to keep from snapping back. Sophia was no better. Later that day, as I was folding laundry, she came into the room and started flipping through the clothes I had just stacked neatly. "You do know these aren't folded right, don't you? They should be able to stand up on their own, like how Mom taught us. Here, let me show you." Again. She tossed the shirt she was holding back onto the pile, messing up what I had done. As she refolded the same shirt with sharp, practiced movements, I felt my frustration rise. "Sophia, I appreciate the lesson, but I've folded clothes before. I'm not an idiot." She just raised her eyebrows, a cold smile playing on her lips. Could have fooled me. But hey, if you're okay with being mediocre, who am I to argue? Her words felt like a slap, and for a moment, I just stood there, watching her make my efforts seem pointless. It was the same with cooking. Every meal I attempted was met with criticism or outright laughter, especially if I tried to make anything Italian. One evening, I decided to try again, making a simple pasta dish I thought I had mastered. I was stirring the pot when Sophia walked into the kitchen. "What's that supposed to be?" she asked, peering into the pot with a skeptical look. "It's spaghetti carbonara. I thought it might be nice for dinner," I said, hoping for a change in her usual harsh tone. She took a fork, twirled some pasta onto it, and tasted it with an exaggerated expression of disgust. "Nice? This is what you call nice? I wouldn't feed this to the dog. It's all wrong." I slammed the pot's lid down a little harder than necessary. "Well, it's what's for dinner, so if you don't like it, you're welcome to make something else." The tension in the house grew every day, and Jake's absence didn't help. He was always at the restaurant, always busy, and when he was home, he avoided any conflict. Whenever I tried to talk to him about how his sister and mother were treating me, he'd just sigh and say something like, "I know it's tough, Emily, but try to hang in there. They'll warm up to you eventually. Just give it time." After giving birth to my son, I hoped things might get better, but the reality was just the opposite. I had gained a good amount of weight during pregnancy, which became the new source of their mockery. "Look at how much she's eating," Anna would laugh as I tried to nourish myself for breastfeeding. "Are you feeding a child or a small army?" One day, while I was nursing my son in the living room, I heard Sophia mimic a cow's moo from the kitchen. The sound sliced through me, and tears pricked my eyes. It was clear they saw me as nothing more than a cow, a utility for my son. I reached my breaking point after the mocking, and the cold treatment at home became too much. I needed something for myself, a space where I wasn't just the criticized daughter-in-law or the underappreciated wife. That's when I decided to start my own YouTube channel and Instagram page. One morning, while Jake was at the restaurant and Sophia was out shopping, I set up my old camera in the corner of our cramped guest room, my new makeshift gym. "I'm doing this," I muttered to myself, adjusting the angle. "For me, not for them." I started recording simple workout videos, ones that could be done at home, especially appealing to moms like me who couldn't always hit the gym. It felt awkward at first, talking to a camera, pretending I was speaking to an audience who cared about what I had to say. But soon, it became my refuge. The first few videos were clumsy, my commentary stilted. "Hey everyone, it's Emily here, bringing you a quick 10-minute workout perfect for busy moms. Let's get started." My follower count started to grow, and with it, my confidence. I invested in a better camera, learned a bit about lighting and editing from online tutorials. My little project was turning into something real, something entirely mine. One afternoon, I was recording a new video, a low-impact cardio sequence, when Sophia barged into the room. "What the hell are you doing?" she snapped, her eyes darting from the camera to me. "You turning our home into your personal TV show now?" I paused the recording, my heart pounding not from the exercise, but from the confrontation. "Yes, I am actually. It's something important to me. I need something of my own, Sophia." She scoffed, looking around with disdain. "You think you're some kind of star? Please, get over yourself, Emily." The words hurt, but I was getting better at handling her barbs. Well, it's not like I have your approval for anything else around here. I might as well do one thing I enjoy. Sophia rolled her eyes and stormed out, but I didn't stop the camera for long. I resumed my session, my voice stronger than before. As my digital presence grew, so did the opportunities. Brands started reaching out to me, offering to send free products for me to use in my videos. Then came the offers for sponsored posts. The first time a brand offered me money to feature their product, I was in disbelief. I can't believe they're paying me for this, I said to Jake over dinner one night, trying to share my excitement. That's great, Emily, he said, though his tone was distracted, his mind on his restaurant troubles. Just keep it quiet, okay? Mom and Sophia don't need to know about this. As I turned back to the dishes, a notification pinged on my phone. Another comment, another follower, another step away from the disdain and towards something beautifully ordinary, but all mine. You're doing amazing, Emily. Thanks for sharing your journey, the comment read. My channel wasn't just a hobby anymore, it was a budding business, pulling in more cash than Jake's struggling restaurant. Soon, I was handing him $2,000 a month to cover the house bills, making it look like his contribution. Despite my success, Anna and Sophia still treated me like a freeloader. She does nothing around here, just prances about making her silly videos. Anna would snipe when she thought I was out of earshot. Sophia was no better, echoing her mother's sentiments and adding her own barbs about how I should be doing more housework like a real woman. Then Jake's restaurant hit a rough patch. He came to me, looking more worn than I'd seen him in months. The restaurant needs a cash injection badly. Can you help out? His eyes were pleading. I didn't hesitate, transferring $10,000 for what he called urgent developments. He was thankful, genuinely so, but it wasn't long before he was asking for more. Just another $5,000 for the bills this month, he said softly, almost ashamed. I agreed, because I could afford it, and because he was still the father of my son, who he absolutely adored. But deep down, I felt the imbalance growing, not just in our finances, but in our relationship too. Life at Jake's family home was always strained, but it turned unbearable when Sophia got married and brought her husband, Mark, to live with us. The house was packed, and any semblance of privacy or peace I had carved out for myself and my son vanished overnight. Anna, never one to mince words, started calling me lazy and a parasite right to my face. You do nothing around here, she'd snap as I tried to manage my online work while keeping an eye on my son. Just taking up space. It didn't help that Sophia was now expecting her first child, and Anna made it clear they needed more room, implying that my son and I were in the way. Soon, there'll be another baby in the house, and we can't have freeloaders taking up space, Anna declared one evening, her eyes darting pointedly in my direction. The atmosphere grew colder, and then, as if things couldn't get any worse, Jake announced he had to leave town for a few weeks to handle some urgent matters with his restaurant in another city. He packed up and left, kissing me and our son goodbye, oblivious to the storm he was leaving behind. I tried to keep things normal, taking my son to school and continuing with my videos in the park. But the day everything truly fell apart was like any other until it wasn't. After picking up my son from school, we walked back home, chatting about his day, only to find our belongings, suitcases, bags of clothes, and even my son's toys, piled up outside the front door. Confused and heartbroken, I rang the doorbell, only to be greeted by the cold faces of Anna and Sophia through the window. They opened the door just a crack, enough to speak, but not enough to let us in. You need to find somewhere else to stay, Anna said, her voice harsh and unwavering. What are you talking about? What about Jake? What will I tell him? I demanded, my voice rising in panic and anger. Sophia laughed, a cruel, cutting sound. Tell him whatever you want. He's not here to care, is he? I tried calling Jake, but my calls went unanswered, sinking me deeper into a mix of despair and fury. With no other options, I gathered our things and managed to get us a room at a nearby hotel. Sitting there, in that impersonal room with my confused and upset son, I felt a shift inside me. This wasn't just a temporary retreat, it was a forced eviction from a life I could no longer tolerate. I had just finished unpacking our essentials when my phone pinged with a new message. It was from Sophia, which was odd because we hardly communicated directly, especially not since the fallout. Her message was shockingly cheerful. "Thought you might want to see what your beloved husband has been up to," accompanied by a link. Curiosity piqued and anxiety tightening in my chest, I clicked the link. It redirected me to a social media page filled with photos of Jake, photos that showed him not on some urgent business trip as he claimed, but enjoying cozy dinners and walks on the beach with another woman. The timestamp on the latest photo, just yesterday. I sat there, numb, the phone slipping slightly from my hand as the realization hit me. He wasn't just away on business, he was living a whole other life without us. Anger, sharp and bitter, bubbled up, but before I could drown in it, my son tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, are you okay?" His small voice, filled with concern, pulled me back from the edge. I forced a smile, scooping him up into my arms. "Yeah, buddy, I'm okay. Just a little tired, that's all." I sat there, staring at the screen, a mix of anger and betrayal coursing through me. All this time, I had been the financial backbone for his failing restaurant and for his family, who had just thrown me and my son out like yesterday's garbage. And here he was, living a double life at my expense. Over the next week, my phone was incessantly buzzing with calls from Jake. When I finally answered, his voice was laced with feigned concern. "Emily, where are you guys? I heard about what happened. You should come back. We have bills to sort out, and the restaurant needs more funding." His words made my blood boil, but I kept my tone neutral. "Sure, Jake. We can discuss it. I'll come by tomorrow." "Great, I really think it's best to handle these things in person," he replied, sounding relieved. Hanging up, I felt a cold determination settle over me. He had no idea that I knew about his affair, or that I had no intention of playing the forgiving wife who footed his bills. Tomorrow's meeting would be a turning point, and I was ready for it. Dropping my son off at school that morning felt like the calm before the storm. As I drove to my mother-in-law Anna's house, where I knew Jake, Anna, and my pregnant sister-in-law, Sophia, would be waiting, my stomach churned with nerves and resolve. When I arrived, Jake was obviously relieved and maybe even a bit happy to see me, unlike Anna and Sophia, whose faces were marked with discontent. Without wasting any time, I pulled out the divorce papers from my bag and handed them to Jake. His shock was palpable, his eyes widening as he scanned the documents. Anna and Sophia couldn't contain their initial reactions and began to smile, thinking this was their victory. That smile quickly faded when I addressed them. "Don't be too quick to celebrate. You've been living off my efforts all this time." Jake's face fell as he admitted to them. "The restaurant isn't doing well. It hasn't been for a long time." The revelation sparked immediate outrage from Anna and Sophia. They turned on him, their earlier glee replaced with anger as they scolded him for keeping them in the dark and for losing what they considered their financial safety net, me. Sophia, ever the brazen one, sneered at me. "Well, since Jake makes less than you, he'll just have to file for alimony. How's that for justice?" Jake perked up at this, nodding eagerly, as if it were some sort of twisted victory. I almost laughed at the absurdity. "That's where you're wrong, Sophia. And Jake," I continued, turning to face him squarely, "you won't see a cent for alimony. I know about the affair." The color drained from his face. "How did you?" "Your sister sent me everything. Pictures, dates, places," I said, pointing to Sophia, whose face turned a shade paler. "Thanks to her, I have all the evidence I need." What followed was a furious back and forth among them, a mess of accusations and denials. I let them drown in their quarrel for a moment before speaking up again. "I'm also taking back everything I paid for. Every appliance, every piece of furniture." Their arguing ceased as the reality of the situation hit them. I had already arranged for movers, and as they began hauling away the refrigerator, the washing machine, the flat-screen TV, And even the fancy blender I had bought last Christmas, Anna and Sophia watched, their faces streaked with tears and disbelief. "You can't do this. We need those things." Anna cried out, her voice breaking. "I did do this, and I need them too," I replied, my voice steady but not unkind. The movers continued their work, clearing out nearly half of what filled their home. As I watched them take away the last of the items, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer tied to this house, these people, or their deceit. I turned back to see Jake, who now looked small and defeated, his dreams of easy money evaporating. "Take care of your sister and your mother, Jake. That's your job now," I said, not unkindly, before turning to leave. As I walked away, I knew that this was more than just a physical departure. It was my final step out of their manipulative grasp, a move towards reclaiming my life and securing a better future for my son and myself. After everything, the divorce was more of a relief than a burden. I filed for compensation due to Jake's infidelity and secured alimony for our son. My lawyer handled everything, making the process as smooth as possible under the circumstances. Life changed dramatically for Jake's family too. His restaurant, unable to stay afloat without my financial support, finally went bankrupt. The family house was sold off to cover debts, a stark testament to their unsustainable lifestyle. Meanwhile, Anna and Sophia, left scrambling, tried reaching out to me, their messages a mix of apologies and pleas for help. But after everything, I couldn't let myself be pulled back into their chaos. I blocked their numbers without a second thought. Sophia's husband left her, and now the whole lot of them, Jake, his mom, his sister, and her child, live crammed into a small rented apartment. It's a tough situation, but one they brought upon themselves. In contrast, life for me and Alex is looking up. We've settled into a nice rhythm in our own rented apartment, a cozy place that feels more like home every day. My YouTube channel and Instagram page have really taken off, resonating with women, especially new moms who are trying to find their way back to fitness. Seeing the positive impact of my work has inspired a new idea, launching online fitness courses specifically tailored for postpartum women. I'm excited about the possibilities and the chance to help others who have been in my shoes. There was so much to do, but for the first time in a long while, the future seemed bright and brimming with potential. Here in our little sanctuary, with my son's laughter echoing off the walls, I felt a profound sense of peace. We had made it through the storm, and now, it was our time to shine. Hey, everybody. Name's Emma, and if you've got a minute, I've got a tale that's a bit of a roller coaster, one that dives into love, betrayal, and a fight for dignity. Before we dive into the deep end, let me set the stage and introduce you to the cast of this little drama of mine. It starts with me, Emma. Born into what many would call privilege, with a silver spoon and all that jazz. But despite the cushy start, I was raised to value hard work over handouts. My dad's the king of the engine additive world, a self-made man who turned a niche into an empire. Mom's no slouch either, she built a beauty salon empire from the ground up, making her name synonymous with style. Their divorce when I was 19 could have been messy, but they kept it classy, splitting everything down the middle while somehow maintaining a friendship. Dad stayed single, content with his business and bachelorhood, while Mom remarried but didn't expand the family beyond me. Enter Jake, stage right. My husband, or as I've come to think of him, the catalyst of my personal upheaval. We got hitched when I was fresh out of college, after I landed a job teaching music to kids with more energy than sense. Life seemed pretty sweet until we hit a bump, I got pregnant, and suddenly, Jake's true colors started to bleed through. One lazy Sunday, sprawled on the couch with his feet up, Jake casually lobbed the grenade into our life. "Emma, babe, why don't you just quit your job? Stay at home with the baby. We'll manage." I nearly choked on my tea. Quit my job? Jake, you know we can't afford that on your salary alone. Plus, I love my work. He waved a hand dismissively, a smirk playing on his lips. Come on, Em. It's not like we're ordinary folks. Your dad's loaded. A little help from him, and we're golden. I felt my blood boil. That's not the point, Jake. I'm not tapping into my parents' wealth for our day-to-day. We agreed to live within our means. But Jake wouldn't let it go. Over dinner, in front of his parents no less, he brought it up again. Emma's considering taking some time off work, you know, with the baby coming and all. His mom, Carol, a woman with a sharp tongue and an eye for advantage, jumped in. Oh, that's wonderful. With Emma's family, you two don't have to worry about a thing. I clenched my fork a little tighter, trying to keep my cool. Actually, we haven't decided anything. And we intend to manage on our own, thank you. Jake's dad, Frank, never one to miss a beat, chimed in with a chuckle. Why play the hard way, Emma? A little help from your folks, and you could be living easy. Why waste that opportunity? The conversation spiraled from there, with Jake and his parents painting grand pictures of a life lived on my parents' dime. Every word felt like a betrayal, twisting the knife a bit deeper. They didn't see me, they saw a ticket to an easy life. That night, lying in bed next to Jake, I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. Jake, do you really think we should be relying on my parents like that? I whispered, hoping for some sign I'd misread the situation. He rolled over, facing me with those eyes that once melted my heart. Emma, it's not about need. It's about what's smart. Your parents can afford it, and we deserve a break. Why not take it? Deserve. That word echoed in my head long after Jake had drifted off to sleep. It was clear we were on different paths, with different values. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd missed the signs, and where we went from here. After that first clash with Jake about money and pride, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd find our way back to the same page. But, oh, was I wrong? Enter the in-laws, stage left, with their own special brand of chaos. Jake's folks weren't exactly the poster children for self-reliance. They had this way of sniffing out a free meal from miles away, and my family's wealth was like a beacon to them. One evening, we're all sitting around our cramped living room, and Frank's going on about this new business opportunity that just needed a small investment to get off the ground. So, Emma, darling, Carol starts, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that could give you cavities. With your family's resources, I bet you could easily help us out. It's such a sure thing. I tried to keep my cool, really I did. Carol, Frank, I've told you before, we're managing our finances independently. My parents' money isn't part of this equation. But Frank, oh, he's got the persistence of a door-to-door salesman. Come on, Emma. It's not like you'd feel it. What's a few thousand to your dad? He probably spends that on golf in a weekend. The audacity floored me. Here they were, sitting in our home, eating our food, and they had the guts to treat my family's hard-earned money like it was theirs for the taking. Jake tries to play mediator. Maybe they have a point. It's just a loan, right? We could help out family. Family? I nearly choked on the word. Jake, when did we decide it's our job to bankroll your parents' dreams? The room went ice cold. Carol, not one to let a moment of drama go by unexploited, piped up. Well, I never. Here we thought family helped each other out. But if you're going to be stingy. Stingy? Now, I was seeing red. Working for what you have isn't being stingy, Carol. It's called being responsible. Maybe you should try it sometime. Frank tried to smooth things over, but the damage was done. Look, Emma, no need to get upset. We're just talking here. Talking, right. I couldn't hide my sarcasm. Seems like all we ever do is talk about how my family can solve your problems. That night, after they finally left, with Jake apologizing for his parents' misunderstanding, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a full-on invasion of our lives by two people who saw me not as a daughter-in-law, but as a walking, talking ATM. After our little Lily came into this world, life took a turn I didn't quite expect. You'd think the arrival of a grandchild would bring out the best in people, right? Well, not so much with Jake's folks. They showed up at the hospital with what had to be the cheapest onesie from the discount bin. It still had the clearance sticker on it. But when my folks came through with a beautiful hand-knit blanket and some top-notch baby gear, you'd have thought World War III was about to break out in that hospital room. Wow, really laying it on thick, aren't they? Carol quipped, eyeing the gifts with a mix of disdain and envy. Must be nice to just throw money around. Bet they could have just gotten you a house instead of all this fluff. Jake chimed in with a chuckle. Yeah, Mom's got a point, Em. Your folks sure don't hold back. A house might have been more practical, huh? My heart sank. Here I was, holding our newborn, and all they could talk about was how my parents should have spent their money. It stung, hearing Jake echo his mom's words. Was our daughter just a dollar sign to them? I tried to keep the peace, biting back my growing anger. Well, it's not about the price tag, right? It's the thought that counts. But Frank wasn't about to let it go. Oh, sure. But when you think about it, a nice little investment in property, now, that's a gift that keeps on giving. The ride home from the hospital was tense. Jake tried to smooth things over, saying his parents were just old-fashioned and didn't mean anything by it. But the seed was planted. Doubts started creeping in about why Jake really married me. Was it love, or was my family's bank account the main attraction? A few weeks later, during one of their unsolicited visits, Carol brought it up again. We were all crammed in our living room, Lily fussing in my arms, and Carol couldn't resist a jab at the new stroller my mom had bought us. Must be nice, having your folks shower Lily with all these expensive toys and gadgets. Though, a contribution to a house fund would have been more useful, don't you think, she said, her voice dripping with that passive-aggressive tone I'd come to dread. Jake, sitting beside his mom, nodded. Actually, babe, we've been talking. Maybe your parents could help us out with a down payment instead of more baby stuff. Makes sense, right? I was floored. Not only were Jake's parents relentless, but now Jake was on board with turning our daughter's birth into a bargaining chip for financial gain. It felt like I was living in some twisted reality where love and family meant less than material wealth. Is that what this is about for you, Jake? Using my parents for money? I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice. I thought we were in this together, for better or worse, not for richer or poorer. Jake looked taken aback, but Carol just sniffed. Well, when your wife's parents are rich, it's only practical to think about these things. After they finally left, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Lily asleep beside me. The realization hit me hard. My marriage, my family, it all felt like a transaction to them. And I was the currency. The last few years have been a roller coaster, to say the least. Lily's grown into a fiery little 3-year-old, full of life and laughter. But life threw us some curveballs that I never saw coming. First, it was Mom. The accident was sudden, a shock to all of us. I was drowning in grief, barely keeping it together, for Lily. But Jake? His first question wasn't about how I was holding up. No, it was, so, how much are you getting from your mom's will? It felt like a slap in the face. My mom wasn't even cold, and here he was, eyeing her legacy like a vulture. According to Mom's will, I inherited the barbershop chain. I knew nothing about running a business, but Jake was quick to offer his expertise. Babe, let me handle this. You know I've got a knack for business, he said, all confidence and smiles. I was too lost in my grief to argue. So, I let him take the reins, though I made sure the ownership papers stayed in my name. I thought, maybe, just maybe, he could turn things around for us. Then, barely a year later, Dad passed away from a heart attack. Losing both my parents in such a short time broke something in me. I needed Jake more than ever, but all he could talk about was what we'd inherit from Dad. The day after Dad's death, Jake's parents came over. I expected maybe a shred of decency, a moment of respect for my loss. But no, they dove straight into speculations about Dad's wealth. So, Emma, must be a hefty sum coming your way, huh? Frank said, barely able to contain his glee. I saw red. Can you not? For once, just stop talking about money. I shouted, the words exploding out of me like shrapnel. Carol put on her best offended face. Well, I never. We're just concerned about the family's future. No need to be rude. Jake tried to play peacemaker, as always. They're just curious. It's a big deal, you know? A big deal? I echoed, my voice rising. My parents are gone, Jake. And all you and your parents can think about is cashing in? Is that all I am to you? A bank? The room fell silent. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake looked at me, then at his parents, and mumbled some half-hearted apology. But the damage was done. I couldn't stand the sight of them, their greed, their complete lack of empathy. Get out, I said, my voice steady, but cold. They left, Carol muttering under her breath, Frank with a scowl. Jake lingered, trying to justify his parents' behavior. But I was done listening. 2 days after my dad died, Jake comes bouncing through the doorway earlier than usual. Babe, I've got awesome news. He beams at me, barely containing his excitement. I've struck a deal to sell the hairdresser chain. Can you believe it? My jaw nearly hit the floor. What? You did what without even asking me? I was fuming, feeling a mix of betrayal and disbelief. Before we could really dive into it, his folks showed up, ready to party like we'd hit the jackpot. They brought in this feast from some fancy restaurant and a bunch of brochures that screamed high roller. Carol was all smiles, waving those brochures in my face. Guess what, honey? We've sold the old condo and put down a deposit on a beach house. We're all moving to the coast. I stared at her, feeling like I was trapped in some bad dream. Hold on. You what? Nobody asked me about moving. I don't want to live by the beach, with all that humidity and the winds, with a kid. Are you out of your mind? Carol just waved off my concerns like I was talking about the weather. Oh, don't you worry about that. We've also booked a cruise. You should come with us. It'll be fabulous. Where's this money coming from? I asked, my patience wearing thin. Well, darling, with your father's passing and the sale of the salons, money's no object now. We're set for life. Think about it, yachts, private jets. We're living the dream. Carol's eyes were practically sparkling with dollar signs. I turned to Jake, utterly dumbfounded. Why are we even talking about selling my mom's business again? And what's this nonsense about being set for life? Babe, it makes sense. Managing both businesses will be too much. We gotta focus on what's more profitable. It's for our future, for our daughter's future. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The greed, the audacity, it was all too much. Show me the financials for the salon, I demanded. I want to see everything before we make any rash decisions. Jake squirmed, avoiding eye contact. Look, it's all about our future, about making sure we're comfortable. His parents joined the chorus, pressing me to just let go and enjoy the windfall. But looking at them, all I could see were vultures circling. Why the rush to sell the hairdresser shops again? I pressed, needing answers from Tom. Jake shrugged, the picture of faux reason. Look, babe, after your dad's gone, juggling both businesses just doesn't make sense. We gotta focus on what brings in more dough. The car oil thing is a gold mine, compared to the salons. His folks perked up at this, chiming in with their 2 cents. Darling, think about it. Selling those little shops could give you a life of luxury. Why waste your time on them? His mom cooed, her voice dripping with greed. The sight of them, practically salivating over my inheritance, made my skin crawl. I want you to leave. Now, I said, my voice firm, my resolve stronger. This is a time to mourn my father, not feast on what he left behind. Jake tried to interrupt, but I cut him off. And another thing, this is my inheritance we're talking about. Mine. You and your parents have no say in this. The air turned icy as they realized I wasn't the pushover they thought I was. With heavy steps and heavier scowls, they left, leaving me to ponder the lonely battle ahead. The dawn after my father's funeral found me in a fog of grief, the world around me dulled to a monotonous gray. That's when Jake decided to inject his version of color back into our lives. Over a breakfast that tasted like cardboard, he launched into his agenda. "We need to call a meeting with the founders of your father's company, pronto," Jake stated, his voice slicing through the quiet like a knife. I paused, a piece of toast halfway to my mouth, and stared at him. "Jake, my father has just been buried. Can't this wait? I need some time to process everything." He waved off my concerns with a flick of his hand. "Time is money, babe. We need to act fast." Frustrated and seeking clarity, I reached out to our family lawyer, asking for a breakdown of the barbershop chain's status and a primer on my father's business dealings. Information, I hoped, would give me some ground to stand on. A month whirled by in a blur of legal jargon and financial statements until Jake, accompanied by his parents, descended upon our house once more, each of them bursting with unsolicited advice and greed-laden suggestions. Without so much as a hello, Jake dove right in. "You know, I've been thinking, I'm the right man to lead your dad's company." The audacity of his claim left me speechless, but he wasn't done. "And I'll need a new car. Something that screams business mogul. The latest BMW should do the trick." Before I could even muster a response, Carol chimed in with her own outrageous demands. "The coastal house is nearly ready. We just need to throw in another $300,000, plus some for furniture. And, dear, I expect you to set up an account for me. I need to maintain my lifestyle, after all." After listening to their endless demands, I knew what I had to do. It was like a switch flipped inside me. No more Mrs. Nice Gal. Clutching the divorce papers like a shield, I stepped forward, interrupting their chatter. "Jake, we need to talk," I announced, placing the papers before him on the coffee table. He picked them up, a frown creasing his forehead. "What's this, then?" His attempt at nonchalance couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. "Divorce papers," I stated, every word deliberate, icy. "I've had the business audited. Jake, you've run it into the ground. It's teetering on the edge of ruin because of your management." His face drained of color, a guilty child caught in a lie. I was trying to make it better," he stammered, his excuses as flimsy as his confidence. "Make it better? By firing our most talented staff and neglecting the core of what made the business succeed?" My voice rose, fueled by a cocktail of anger and betrayal. Carol, ever the meddler, couldn't resist intervening. "Now, dear, let's remember he's entitled to half of everything. Marriage binds assets, after all." I couldn't help but laugh, but there was no joy in it. "Nice try. But everything's been in my name since before I made the colossal mistake of marrying your son. He gets nothing from me." The room went silent. They were stunned, their grand schemes shattering around them. "And another thing," I added, staring Jake down. "You're going to pay back every penny you've cost the business. Every single penny." When the reality of the divorce finally hit Jake, his reaction was to desperately grovel, pleading with me to reconsider. "Please, can't we talk about this? There has to be another way," he begged, his voice cracking with desperation. His parents, not to be outdone in the drama department, launched into their own tearful performance. They lamented about sinking all their funds into the coastal house, a property now hanging by a thread without the next installment. "We're going to lose everything," his mother sobbed, her tears flowing freely. "Please, think of what this means for us." I listened, my heart hardened by their previous actions, feeling nothing but a detached coldness towards their plight. "Sorry, but that's your mess," I stated, my tone unwavering. With a newfound resolve, I guided them to the door, closing it, and this chapter of my life, behind them. In the days that followed, I didn't allow myself to dwell on the past. Instead, I focused on the future, selling the apartment that Jake and I once shared. The sale provided just enough for a quaint, welcoming house that promised a new beginning for my daughter and me. Stepping into our new home, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a sense of peace enveloping us in a way that had been missing for too long. The wheels of justice turned slowly but surely, and when they finally caught up with Jake, he was ordered to compensate for the turmoil he'd inflicted on the hairdresser chain. The courts determined that his recklessness had a price, and he was forced to liquidate his share of our old apartment to meet his financial obligations. Watching him being held accountable for once felt like a bittersweet vindication for the hardship he'd put us through. Out of nowhere, my phone rang one day, and on the other end was my former mother-in-law, her voice laced with desperation. "We're in a bind. We need help to buy a place, any amount would help," she pleaded, her audacity leaving me incredulous. I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts, before responding. "You made your bed," I replied, my tone steady and resolute. "It's time you lie in it." Ending the call, a mix of emotions washed over me, anger at their continued sense of entitlement, but also a profound sense of freedom from their clutches. After everything that went down with the divorce and wrestling back control over my mom's hairdresser chain, life finally started to brighten up again. It was a tough climb, but gradually, the salons began to find their old spark. Bringing back those top stylists we'd lost felt like a victory parade. Watching them walk back through those doors, ready to bring their magic back to our chairs, it was like watching the place come alive again. Turns out, I was more cut out for the business world than I'd ever imagined. Each day was a new lesson, a new surprise about what I could achieve. If it hadn't been for being cornered by life's cruel twists, I might never have uncovered this side of me. Handling my dad's car oil business was another mountain to climb. For now, I decided to bring in a manager to steer the ship while I got my bearings. "It's all yours for now, but keep me in the loop," I told him, making it clear I was still in charge. "Once Lily's old enough, maybe around 20, I'm thinking of passing it to her if she's interested. I want her to have options, to choose her path. Meanwhile, I'm dipping my toes into it, learning the ropes." Our new home, just me and Lily, was a haven of peace, a world away from the turmoil we'd left behind. It was small, sure, but it was ours, a place where we could grow, heal, and build something new. Every corner filled with laughter, every nook cradling a memory we were making together. Out in the garden, Lily's laughter was a balm to my soul. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you," she'd say, her eyes alight with wonder and admiration. "You're going to be even more amazing," I'd respond, pulling her into a hug. I knew, deep down, that we were on the brink of something wonderful. Together, we were unstoppable, ready to meet whatever the future held with open arms and hopeful hearts. The day I turned 4 was the day I became invisible. Not in a cool, superhero kind of way, but in a "my parents literally forget I exist" kind of way. That's because my brother, Michael, came into the world, and suddenly, I might as well have been a piece of furniture for all the attention I got. My dad, Joe, was the kind of guy who had his heart set on passing his car repair shops down to a son. So, when Michael was born, it was like he won the lottery. Mom, Sarah, just went along with whatever made Dad happy. It was always about the heir and the legacy with him. Me? I was just Anna, the first attempt that didn't quite hit the mark. "Joe, can you believe it? We have a son now." Mom's voice would echo through the house like she was announcing the arrival of royalty. "Yeah, Sarah, the heir. Finally," Dad would respond, his voice booming with a mix of pride and relief, as if he'd been holding his breath waiting for a son and could finally breathe easy. I remember standing there, clutching my doll, feeling my heart sink. Didn't I count for something too? Thankfully, my grandparents, Frank and Mary, lived just down the street. They were my safe haven. Grandma Mary would always greet me with warm hugs and freshly baked cookies, making me feel like the most special girl in the world. "Anna, come here, love. Tell me about your day," she'd say, her eyes twinkling with genuine interest. Grandpa Frank, with his endless stories and hearty laughs, made me feel like adventure was just around the corner. And then there was Aunt Lily, Dad's sister, who never had kids of her own but treated me like I was hers. "Who needs Em anyway?" Aunt Lily would say about my parents, her voice rough from years of smoking. "You got us, kid. We're your real family." Aunt Lily was the cool aunt. She'd take me on walks, tell me stories about the good old days, and teach me how to stand up for myself. "If anyone gives you trouble, you come to me," she'd say, her tone serious, but her eyes soft. "We don't take crap from anyone, got it?" "Got it," I'd reply, feeling a mix of comfort and confidence wash over me. Life went on like this for a while. At home, I was the ghost girl, tiptoeing around a brother who was showered with all the love and attention a kid could want. At my grandparents' house, I was Anna, the cherished granddaughter, the beloved niece. One evening, after another day of being overlooked, I went to my grandparents' house, seeking the warmth and affection I craved. The contrast between their home and mine was like night and day. "Your dad's too caught up in his dreams of legacy," Grandpa Frank said, shaking his head. "Doesn't realize the treasure he's got in you." "He's a fool, Anna," Aunt Lily chimed in, her voice hard. "But we've got your back, always." It was in these moments, surrounded by my grandparents and aunt, that I felt whole. They saw me for who I was, not as a disappointment or a shadow, but as Anna, a girl with her own dreams and worth. But no matter how much love they gave me, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being the forgotten daughter at home. It was a title I didn't want but seemed stuck with, a reminder that in my parents' eyes, I was just the prologue to my brother's story. My 10th birthday was a big deal, at least to me. In our little world, hitting double digits meant you were no longer a little kid. Grandma and Grandpa knew this and decided to surprise me with something I'd been dreaming of, my very own phone. Not just any phone, but a shiny, new one that I could use to call them or Aunt Lily anytime I felt invisible at home. "Happy birthday, Anna. Look what we got for you." Grandma beamed, her eyes shining with excitement as she handed me the small, wrapped box. I tore off the wrapping paper, my heart racing. The moment I saw the phone, my world lit up. "Oh my gosh, thank you. This is the best gift ever." I couldn't contain my excitement, hugging them both tightly. Aunt Lily winked at me. "Now you can call me whenever you want, kiddo. No more feeling left out, yeah?" "Yeah," I grinned, feeling a sense of independence bubble up inside me. But my joy was short-lived. The very next day, Dad saw the phone in my hand. His face turned into a scowl, the kind that made my stomach twist into knots. "What's that?" he barked, nodding toward the phone. "It's my birthday gift from Grandma and Grandpa," I said, my voice small, already sensing trouble. Dad snatched the phone from my hands. "You don't need this. Michael will get more use out of it." "But Dad," I protested, my heart sinking. "It was my gift." "Enough," he snapped, turning away. "Michael, come here. Look what you've got now." I watched, devastated, as my little brother took the phone with a confused yet excited look. He didn't understand the gravity of the situation, but I did. It was another loud, clear message: Michael mattered more. Later, I cried to Aunt Lily over what happened. She was furious, her usual cool demeanor replaced with fiery anger. "That's bullshit." Aunt Lily rarely cursed, but when she did, it was serious. "They had no right to do that to you. It's your gift, your phone." Grandma and Grandpa were more diplomatic, but equally upset. "We'll talk to Joe," Grandpa said, his jaw set in a way that told me he meant business. The confrontation that ensued was something out of a primetime drama. Grandma and Grandpa, with Aunt Lily in tow, stormed over to our house. I tagged along, a mix of nervous and eager to see justice done. "Joe, you will give Anna her phone back this instant. It was a gift from us to her, not to Michael," Grandma stated, her voice steady but filled with a rare edge of authority. Dad looked taken aback, not used to being challenged, especially in his own home. It's just a phone. Michael can. It's not about the damn phone, Joe. Aunt Lily cut in, her voice rising. It's about respecting your daughter's feelings. About showing her she matters too. There was a tense silence. Mom stood by, wringing her hands, a silent spectator, as always. Finally, Dad relented, muttering under his breath as he fetched the phone and handed it back to me. Fine. But don't expect any more gifts like this, he grumbled. Thank you, I whispered, clutching the phone like a lifeline. As we walked back to Grandma and Grandpa's house, Aunt Lily put an arm around my shoulders. Remember, Anna, you're worth more than how they treat you. Don't you forget that. Grandma squeezed my hand. We'll always be here for you, my dear. Always. The year I turned 11, my world came crashing down. It wasn't just a bad day or a temporary setback, it was the kind of loss that changes everything. My grandparents, the two people who had been my rock, my sanctuary, were gone. Killed in a train accident, just like that. No goodbyes, no last hugs, nothing. Just a gaping hole where their love and warmth used to be. I remember coming home from school that day. The house was unusually quiet, but there was this tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Mom and Dad were in the living room, and Aunt Lily was there too, tears streaming down her face. I'd never seen her cry before. She was always the strong one, the unbreakable one. Seeing her like that scared me more than anything. What's going on? My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. Dad looked up, his face hard, no trace of the usual indifference. Your grandparents were in a train accident. They didn't make it. The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My legs gave way, and I sank to the floor, the world spinning around me. Aunt Lily rushed over, pulling me into her arms. It's going to be okay, Anna. We'll get through this together, she whispered, but her voice cracked, betraying her own despair. But things went from bad to worse. The funeral was a blur, a procession of faces, some familiar, most not, all offering the same empty condolences. I'm sorry for your loss. They were wonderful people. Words meant to comfort, but they felt like ash in my mouth. After the funeral, the Real bomb dropped. Dad announced that he was selling Grandma and Grandpa's house. The house where I'd spent the best parts of my childhood, where I felt loved and wanted. Aunt Lily was livid. You can't do that, Joe. That house is supposed to be for Anna. Dad snorted, a sound full of contempt. The will's a mess, Lily. And I'm next of kin. The house is mine to sell. And sell it I will. But where will I go? You're kicking me out on the street? Aunt Lily's voice was high, panicked. She'd lived with my grandparents since forever. That house was her home too. You should have thought about that before. Not my problem. Dad shot back, his tone cold and final. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could he be so cruel? Didn't he care at all? Aunt Lily gathered her dignity around her like a cloak, wiping away her tears. Fine. I'll leave. But know this, Joe, you're losing the only family you've got left. Hope it's worth it. Dad nodded, and that was that. Aunt Lily had to pack up her life and leave the only home she'd known. I remember hugging her tight, not wanting to let go. She hugged me back, whispering, "It'll be okay, kiddo. We'll figure something out." Aunt Lily moved into this tiny apartment not too far from our place. It wasn't much, but it was hers. So, I started sneaking out to see Aunt Lily. It felt like a mini rebellion, but I needed to be with someone who understood, someone who felt the loss as much as I did. "Hey, Aunt Lily," I'd say, stepping into her cramped living room that somehow felt more like home than my actual house. "Anna, what are you doing here? Your dad will have my head if he finds out you're visiting." She'd half scold, half laugh, pulling me into a hug. "I don't care. I needed to see you," I'd reply, feeling the tension drain out of me. we'd sit and talk for hours. She'd tell me stories about Grandma and Grandpa, keeping their memory alive. Sometimes we'd just sit in silence, each lost in our thoughts, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with love and shared grief. After Grandma and Grandpa passed away, my life took a nosedive into something I barely recognized. Home wasn't home anymore, it felt more like I was some kind of servant. I did everything, scrubbed floors, cooked meals that no one thanked me for, and tried to keep the house in order. It was exhausting, and all the while, I felt this heavy ache for the family I lost, the warmth that used to greet me every day after school. Then came that Friday that felt like the final straw. School had been rough, and all I wanted was to dump my backpack and collapse onto my bed. But nope, the universe had other plans. The house was locked, and not a soul was in sight. I sat on the steps, confusion slowly turning to worry, then to a kind of desperate loneliness as the hours ticked by. Mrs. Henderson from next door came over, her brows furrowed in concern. "Dear, why are you sitting out here? Didn't your folks tell you they were heading out for the weekend?" That's when it hit me. They left. Without a word, without a thought. Tears sprang to my eyes, and Mrs. Henderson tooted, shaking her head. "Oh, honey, come here," she said, but I shook my head, wiping at my eyes. "I'll figure something out," I mumbled, my voice all choked up. It was getting late, the kind of late that makes everything seem worse, so I made my way to Aunt Lily's. My heart felt like it was sitting heavy in my chest, each step heavier than the last. Knocking on Aunt Lily's door felt like admitting defeat, but the moment she opened it and saw my face, her expression shifted from surprise to something fierce. "Anna? What happened?" she asked, pulling me inside. I spilled everything, the words tumbling out in a rush, and by the end, Aunt Lily's face was set in a hard line. She dialed my dad, her tone sharp as broken glass. "Joe, your daughter was locked out, left on the doorstep like a forgotten package. What's going on?" Dad's voice came through the phone, all casual like we were discussing the weather. "Oh, that. We thought she was with you. Don't make a drama out of it, Lily. If you're so concerned, she can stay with you." Aunt Lily's eyes flashed, and I knew that was it. "Fine, Joe. She'll stay with me. Someone's got to look after her," she snapped, hanging up before he could reply. That night, Aunt Lily made space for me, a little nook in her apartment that felt more welcoming and warm than my entire house had felt in months. "You're with me now, kiddo. We'll make it work, you and me," she said, her voice soft but determined. And I stayed with her. Later, as I could understand with my childish mind, she got the status of guardian over me. Life with Aunt Lily was different. We didn't have much, stretching every dollar till it screamed, but there was laughter in that small apartment, and a kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. We were a team, tackling everything from bills to grocery shopping with a can-do spirit that made even the hard days seem okay. Living with Aunt Lily, things started to look up in ways I hadn't dared to hope. She pushed me, always in that tough love way of hers, to not let the past define my future. "You're smarter than you give yourself credit for, kiddo. Use that brain for something big," she'd say, nudging me towards the stack of college brochures piled on our tiny kitchen table. I hit the books hard. School became my escape, a place where I could prove to myself, and maybe a bit to my parents, wherever they were, that I was more than just a forgotten daughter. Nights were long, filled with study sessions that stretched until the streetlights outside flickered off. One evening, Aunt Lily caught me dozing off into my textbook. "You're burning the candle at both ends, Anna. Don't run yourself ragged." I rubbed my eyes, yawning. "I've gotta. Scholarships, Aunt Lily. It's the only way I'm getting into college." She sat down next to me, her voice serious. "I know, honey. Just, don't forget to breathe. You've got this, but don't forget to live a little too." Her words stuck with me, a gentle reminder that while the future was important, so was the present. When acceptance letters started rolling in, Aunt Lily and I jumped around our living room like a couple of loons. I had done it, full ride to study political science. The joy in Aunt Lily's eyes was something I'd carry with me forever. "You did it, Anna. I'm so damn proud of you." College was a whirlwind. Between classes, I snagged a part-time job and applied for every scholarship under the sun. Money was tight, and every little bit helped. Aunt Lily did her part too, working extra shifts, always with that uncomplaining resilience that defined her. "Every penny towards your future," she'd say, slipping me a few extra dollars she'd saved up from tips. I graduated top of my class, fueled by a blend of Aunt Lily's unwavering support and my own stubborn determination. The day I walked across that stage, diploma in hand, I saw Aunt Lily in the crowd, cheering louder than anyone. I couldn't help but think, this is for us. Landing a job after college felt like the next big leap. It wasn't just any job either. A renowned think tank had seen potential in me, a kid from nowhere with nothing but grit and a degree. "You're going to do great things, Anna. I just know it," Aunt Lily said, her voice thick with emotion, the night before my first day. "Yeah, but only because you believed in me first," I replied, knowing full well that none of this would have been possible without her. As my career took off, so did the rest of my life. Landing a job at a prestigious think tank was just the start. My days were filled with research, policy analysis, and even the occasional TV appearance to discuss the latest political developments. It was exhilarating, the kind of life I'd dreamed of but never really believed I'd achieve. One evening, after a particularly successful panel discussion on television, Aunt Lily and I sat in our living room, a modest but cozy space we'd made our own over the years. She was flipping through the channels, trying to find a rerun of the discussion. "Look at you, all smart and important on the TV. Makes an aunt proud," she said, not looking away from the screen. I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Come on, Aunt Lily. It's just a panel. Besides, I wouldn't be here without you." "That's right, you wouldn't," she teased, finally settling on the channel just as my segment replayed. "But don't sell yourself short. You're doing the work, Anna. You're making a difference." It was moments like these that I cherished the most. Despite the success and the busy schedule, Aunt Lily kept me grounded. She reminded me of where I came from and what really mattered. Then came Mark, a fellow political scientist I met at a conference. He was passionate, smart, and, unlike me, incredibly outgoing. We hit it off immediately, finding common ground in our work and our shared vision for the future. Introducing him to Aunt Lily was a nerve-wracking experience. They were the two most important people in my life, and I desperately wanted them to get along. "So, you're the young man who's stolen Anna's heart," Aunt Lily said, eyeing Mark with a mix of skepticism and curiosity as we sat down for dinner one night. Mark chuckled, not missing a beat. "Stolen is such a strong word. I'd like to think she gave it willingly." Aunt Lily snorted, but I could tell she was impressed. "Well, as long as you keep her happy and support her dreams, we won't have a problem." Mark reached for my hand across the table. "Nothing is more important to me," he said, and I believed him. Our life together blossomed from there. We got married in a small, intimate ceremony with Aunt Lily officiating. It was perfect, a celebration of love, family, and new beginnings. When we moved to a new state for Mark's business ventures, it was a big change, but it felt right. We built a large, warm house that soon echoed with the laughter of our two daughters, Emily and Sophie. Aunt Lily moved in with us, taking on the role of doting grandmother with gusto. My career continued to thrive. I participated in debates, led election campaigns, and even received an award from the state governor for my charitable work. It was a far cry from the lonely, forgotten girl I once was. Despite the early hardships, the loss, and the struggles, I'd found success, love, and a family that was mine by choice, not just by blood. Aunt Lily, Mark, Emily, Sophie, they were my world, a testament to the fact that with enough love and determination, you can build a future worth dreaming of. Walking back from a big interview, my mind was buzzing with thoughts of how it went and the questions I could have answered better. That's when I saw them in the parking lot, two figures looking lost and out of place. As I got closer, a wave of surprise hit me. It was my parents, the very same who'd left me to fend for myself all those years ago. "Can I help you?" I asked, even though I recognized them immediately. "Anna, it's us. We saw you on TV." My mom started, her voice overlapping with my dad's. "We're so proud of you, darling," my dad added, trying to find the right words. "We've missed you. We want to be part of your life again." I couldn't hide my astonishment, nor the bitterness that quickly followed. "My life? Now? My family is Aunt Lily, Mark, and my girls. You chose to leave that life behind." They looked desperate, almost as if they were clawing at the last straws of hope. "Please, Anna, we're your parents. We made mistakes, but we're family." That's when I pressed them, needing to understand their sudden reappearance. "Why now? What's changed?" The story spilled out. My brother, chasing his musical dreams over the path they had chosen for him, leaving them to face their crumbling world alone. My father's neglect of the business leading to its downfall, my mother's lack of work experience leaving them without a safety net. Their house, once a symbol of their future, now on the market with nowhere else to turn. Listening to them, I felt a mix of emotions. There was a part of me that wanted to help, to extend the compassion I'd learned to embody through my political career. Yet, another part of me remembered the nights spent locked out, the birthdays forgotten, the milestones uncelebrated. Standing there on the street, I didn't hold back. "You remember when you tossed Aunt Lily out, right? Or how about the time you left me sitting on the porch, locked out of the house?" "Yeah, I haven't forgotten that," I told them, each word heavy with years of unspoken hurt. I could see the realization dawning on their faces, the weight of their actions finally sinking in. But it was too late for regrets. I reached into my purse, pulled out some cash, and handed it to them. "This should cover your trip back. I think it's best if you leave now." Watching them walk away was like closing a book on a long, painful chapter of my life. But there was one call I needed to make, to my brother, the one person who truly understood what it was like growing up in our household. "Hey, it's me," I started, the moment he picked up. "Guess who just paid me a visit?" His laugh came through the phone, light and knowing. "Let me guess, our dear old folks?" "Yeah, but I handled it. Told them we're doing just fine without their sudden guilt trip," I said, feeling a mix of relief and strength. "I'm proud of you, sis. You've always been the strong one," he replied, his voice warm and reassuring. "How's the tour going?" I asked, changing the subject to something lighter. "It's amazing. You wouldn't believe the crowds we're drawing. Guess I'm finally living the dream, huh?" His excitement was palpable, and it made me smile. "Always knew you would. Just promise me you'll swing by here on your next tour. The girls would love to see their uncle rock the stage." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," he promised. "Take care, sis. Love you." "Love you too." Hanging up, I felt a profound sense of peace. My life had come full circle in so many ways. Here I was, a successful woman, surrounded by people who loved me for me. Aunt Lily, Mark, my girls, and even my brother, from afar, formed the fabric of my true family. I'm Jess, and if you told me 11 years ago that my life would take such a wild turn, I'd have laughed it off. But here I am, stuck in a reality I never imagined. It all began innocently enough. I met Jack at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was charming, with a smile that could light up a room, and we hit it off right away. Fast forward through a whirlwind romance, and we were married, living what seemed like a dream. A year into our marriage, our son Max came into the world, making our little family feel complete. Life got real tough when Max started getting sick all the time. My job was on the line, but my boss, Mr. Harris, he was a lifesaver. "Jess, you're a rock star at work, and we can't lose you. How about you work from home? Keep an eye on the little guy and keep the ball rolling here," he suggested. And just like that, my living room turned into my new office. Juggling work calls, Max's needs, and household chores became my new norm. But that's where the fairy tale ended and real life began. As I became this superwoman handling it all, something in Jack changed. The man who used to help around the house, who used to play with Max for hours, began to change. It was like he resented me for being at home, even though it was for our son. He'd walk in from work, not even a hello before he'd slump on the couch, eyes glued to his phone. "Jack, could you help Max with his homework?" I'd ask after a long day of balancing spreadsheets and laundry. "I'm beat, Jess. You handle it. You're home all day, aren't you?" He'd reply, not even looking up. His words stung, but I bit my tongue. I didn't want to fight in front of Max, who was becoming more perceptive each day. But it wasn't just me. His attitude towards Max shifted too. Gone were the days of patient father-son chats. Now, it was all short, snappy comments. "Max, quit being a baby. Man up." Jack would snap when Max struggled with something. I tried to talk to Jack about it, to understand what was eating at him. But every attempt just bounced off him like he was made of stone. "Jack, we need to talk. This isn't working," I said one evening when Max was at a sleepover. "Here we go again. Nag, nag, nag. You know, maybe if you weren't so busy playing the perfect housewife, you'd see I'm dealing with real stress at work," he retorted, his words laced with a bitterness that took me aback. "But we're supposed to be a team, Jack. It's us against the problem, not us against each other," I shot back, my patience wearing thin. "Save it, Jess. I've got enough on my plate without home becoming another battlefield," he said, dismissing the conversation with a wave of his hand before storming out. I stood there, in the silence of our living room, feeling more alone than ever. It was like living with a stranger, a man who wore the same face as my husband but carried none of his warmth, none of his love. The shift in Jack's behavior didn't just come out of the blue. It crept in slowly, like a shadow growing longer as the sun sets, until one day, the room was dark. About 3 years back, that's when the late nights started becoming more frequent. Each time Jack walked through the door past midnight, his excuses were as thin as paper. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because Max had just won his soccer game, and we were waiting to celebrate with Jack. But as usual, the chair at the head of the table remained empty. Max's eyes kept darting to the clock, then to the door, and finally, settling on me with a mix of disappointment and confusion. I plastered a smile on my face, trying to keep the mood light. "Your dad's really swamped at work, honey. But he's so proud of you, you know that, right?" I reassured Max, but the words felt hollow even to me. It wasn't until much later that Jack decided to grace us with his presence. The sound of the door creaking open pulled me out of my troubled thoughts. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the remains of a celebration that never was laid out in front of me. Jack walked in, looking worn out, but there was something else in his demeanor, something off. I could smell the faint trace of perfume, definitely not mine, and it made my stomach churn. "Jack, where have you been? Max waited up for you. He won his game today, remember?" I tried to keep the accusation out of my voice, but it was hard. The game. Yeah, work, Jess. It's killing me. You know how it is," Jack mumbled, not even bothering to meet my gaze as he made a beeline for the fridge. "No, I don't know, Jack. It seems like work is all you ever have to say these days. And what's that smell? Since when do your colleagues wear such strong perfume?" I pushed, the words spilling out before I could stop them. Jack's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "What are you implying, Jess? That I'm cheating on you? That's rich, coming from someone who's holed up here all day." The accusation stung, and I felt my face flush with anger. "I'm here taking care of our son, our home, while you're out there doing God knows what. And it's not just the perfume, Jack. I found a strand of black hair on your jacket. Last time I checked, my hair was blonde." Jack let out a scoff, his ego inflating like a balloon. "Oh, Please, Jess. You're being paranoid. You think just because I come home smelling like someone else's perfume, I'm having an affair? Maybe you're just jealous. Maybe you still want me, huh? I was taken aback by his mockery. It wasn't like him. The Jack I knew would have reassured me, would have laughed it off and made me feel like a fool for even doubting. But this man, this stranger in my kitchen, he was egging me on, almost enjoying it. You think this is funny, Jack? Our marriage is hanging by a thread, and you're standing there making jokes? What happened to you? My voice broke, the frustration and hurt I'd been bottling up finally spilling over. Jack shrugged, his expression cold and detached. Maybe I've just had enough, Jess. Enough of this domestic bliss you keep trying to shove down my throat. I'm out there busting my ass every day, and I come home to this nagging and suspicion. You want to know where I've been? Out, where I don't have to deal with this crap. With those words, he grabbed a beer from the fridge and headed towards the living room, leaving me standing there, a mix of disbelief and anger coursing through me. As I heard the TV flick on, the familiar sound of laughter from some late-night show filling the house, I realized that the gap between us had grown too wide to bridge with mere words. The day started like any other, with Max's laughter filling the house as I juggled work and household chores. But a call from Mr. Harris changed everything. Jess, we need you in the office today. Big client coming in, and we can't do this without you, he said. I was torn. Max was down with one of his fevers again, and with Jack's unpredictable schedule, I couldn't just leave our son alone. I called Jack, hoping he'd understand the urgency. Jack, it's important. Mr. Harris needs me at the office. Can you come home early today? Max isn't feeling well. Jack's response was a cold splash of reality. Are you kidding me, Jess? You know I can't just leave work in the middle of the day. Handle it, like you always do. His words stung, but there was no time to argue. I called Helen, Jack's mom, and thank heavens, she agreed to help. Of course, dear. You go and take care of your work. Max will be fine with me. The meeting was intense, but we nailed it. Mr. Harris suggested celebrating at a nearby restaurant, and though my mind was at home with Max, I couldn't refuse. We settled into our seats, the clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversations around us. But as I scanned the room, my heart dropped. There, in a dimly lit corner, was Jack, his hand on another woman's, their heads close together in intimate conversation. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Mr. Harris noticed my pale face. Jess, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. I need a moment, I managed to say, my legs shaky as I stood up. I headed to the restroom, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Not Jack. Not us. But the truth was right there, laughing and flirting over candlelight. I splashed water on my face, trying to calm the storm inside me. As I looked in the mirror, a fierce determination replaced the shock. I wouldn't let this slide. Not this time. Back at the table, I apologized to Mr. Harris and the clients. I'm sorry, I need to take care of something urgent. Please excuse me. I left the restaurant, my mind a whirlwind of hurt and anger. Jack didn't even notice me leave, so engrossed was he in his affair. I made it home, my hands trembling as I opened the door. Helen was there, her concerned eyes meeting mine. Is everything all right, dear? I couldn't spill it, not then. Just a rough day at work, Helen. Thanks for watching, Max. Helen gave me a knowing look. Anything you want to talk about? I forced a smile. Nothing to worry about. Just work stuff. Thanks again, Helen. After Helen left, the silence of the house wrapped around me. The image of Jack with that woman replayed in my mind. But I wasn't about to let anger take the wheel. This fury was fuel. Jack had made his choice, and now it was my move. The game had shifted, and as the night crept in, a plan began to form. A plan to make sure Jack regretted betraying the family he took for granted. The next morning felt heavy, like I was carrying a weight around my heart. Jack had left early, his usual routine, acting like nothing was wrong. But everything had changed for me. As I watched Max play, his innocence a stark contrast to the mess of our lives, I knew I had to act. But how? I couldn't just confront Jack without proof, and my word against his wouldn't hold up. I remembered a conversation with a friend about a private detective they had used. It seemed like a drastic step, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I waited until Max was settled with his video games, then I made the call. "Hello, is this Mr. Reynolds?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, this is he." "How can I help you, ma'am?" came the reply, professional and to the point. I took a deep breath. I need your services. I suspect my husband is involved with someone else. I need proof." Mr. Reynolds was all business. "I understand, ma'am. We handle these cases with utmost discretion. Can you tell me more about your situation?" I poured out the details, the late nights, the perfume, the restaurant incident. Mr. Reynolds listened without interruption, then said, "We can start surveillance on your husband immediately. We'll gather evidence and keep you updated. My fee is..." I agreed without hesitation. The price didn't matter, I needed the truth. Days turned into weeks, and each time Mr. Reynolds sent over photos or snippets of conversations, my heart sank a little more. Jack with the same woman, at restaurants, at a park, and once, chillingly, at a jewelry store. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, each piece of evidence a brutal confirmation of Jack's betrayal. One evening, as I sat staring at the latest set of photos, Max came up to me. "Mom, why are you sad? Did something happen?" I quickly hid the photos and forced a smile. "It's nothing, honey. Just some work stuff. You know how it is." Max looked unconvinced. "If Dad is making you sad, I can tell him to stop. He should be nice to you." I hugged him, tears threatening to spill. "You're such a good boy, Max. But it's not your fight. Mom's got this under control, okay?" Max nodded, but his eyes still held worry. It broke my heart to see him like this, but it also steeled my resolve. Jack had to be held accountable, not just for me, but for Max's sake too. Max's 10th birthday should have been a day of joy and laughter, a celebration of a decade of life. The house was decorated, the cake was ready, and Max's eyes sparkled with excitement. But as the day unfolded, it became clear that it was going to be anything but typical. Jack, once the cornerstone of our little family, had been drifting away, his presence now just a shadow. This day was no different. "Jess, work slammed. I can't make it," he said over the phone, his voice as cold as the winter wind. I watched from the window as he drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and a heavy heart behind. Helen and George, Jack's folks, did their best to fill the void, their faces a mix of concern and disappointment. The party was in full swing, the sound of children's laughter a bittersweet melody. Then, out of nowhere, my phone shattered the calm. Jack's voice, panicked and loud, boomed through the speaker. "Our son's been hit. He's at the hospital now." The room froze, the festive air turning to ice. But there, right in front of me, was Max, safe and unharmed. "Jack, check your number." "Max is right here, safe and sound," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. There was a pause, a moment of silence that felt like an eternity. Then, a quiet, "Sorry, wrong number," before the line went dead. The room was thick with confusion and unspoken questions. I gently nudged Max towards his room, his new video game in hand. "Go on, sweetie. I'll be right there," I said, mustering a smile that felt more like a grimace. Once Max was out of sight, I turned to face Helen and George. Their faces were a mix of shock and worry, a silent demand for an explanation hanging in the air. "Helen, George, there's something you need to know," I began, my heart heavy. Jack hasn't just been buried in work. He's involved with someone else. They have a child together, a little boy." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Helen's eyes welled with tears, and George's jaw clenched, his anger barely contained. "Jess, are you certain?" Helen's voice was a whisper, her world crumbling. I nodded, the truth a bitter pill. "I've seen them, heard their conversations. It's undeniable." The room was silent, the weight of betrayal pressing down on us. "We're with you, Jess. Our son, doing this, it's unforgivable," Helen said, her voice quivering but strong. George stood up, his posture rigid with resolve. "Jack will have to face us, to explain this madness. He owes you, answers." The rest of the day was a haze. The candles were blown out, the cake was cut, but the joy was overshadowed by the storm that loomed on the horizon. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the room, I realized that this was no longer just my battle. That evening, the house was quiet, too quiet. It was the calm before the storm. I sat in the living room, Helen and George by my side, the air heavy with anticipation. We were waiting for Jack, the man who had shattered our lives with his deceit. The door creaked open, and there he was, sneaking in like a thief, unaware of the confrontation that awaited him. He tiptoed towards the stairs, but before he could take another step, I flicked on the light. "Evening, Jack. How's your son? The one who got hit by a car?" I asked, my voice calm but laced with a venom that made him freeze in his tracks. Helen and George sat there, silent sentinels, their eyes fixed on Jack, waiting for his response. Jack's face went pale, his facade crumbling. That was a bad joke, Jess. I didn't mean it." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "A joke? Is that what you call it?" Without another word, I threw the photos and documents on the table in front of him. Each picture, each piece of paper, a testament to his betrayal. "This is no joke, Jack. This is your other life, laid bare for all to see." Jack's eyes darted from the photos to his parents, the magnitude of his actions finally sinking in. I can explain," he stammered, but his words fell flat. "You're done talking, Jack. These pictures, these documents, they speak louder than any lie you could come up with," I said, my resolve steel. Helen let out a sob, her hands covering her face. George's expression was stone, his disappointment a tangible force in the room. "To think our son would stoop this low," he muttered. Jack turned to his parents, desperation in his eyes. "Mom, Dad, I..." But George cut him off, his voice firm and final. "You've made your bed, Jack. Now you lie in it. I'm cutting you off. Everything you would have gotten goes to Max." Jack looked at me, a last-ditch plea in his eyes. "Jess, please. I'll do anything. Don't do this." But the time for mercy had passed. "You had your chance, Jack. Now it's time you face the consequences. I want a divorce, and I'll make sure you pay for every heartache you've caused." The room was silent, the finality of my words hanging in the air. Jack, defeated and broken, gathered his things, his departure marking the end of our life together, but the beginning of a new chapter for me, for Max, for us. Days after Jack's departure, the echo of the door slamming still hung in the air, like a bad odor. I thought I'd seen the last of the drama, but I was dead wrong. The doorbell rang, a sharp, intrusive sound that felt like an invasion. Standing there, with a smirk that could sour milk, was Jack's mistress, her confidence as misplaced as her morals. Well, if it isn't the jilted wife. "Time to pack up, darling. Jack's with me now, and so's everything that was yours." "This pretty little house?" "I'm thinking curtains, maybe some new furniture." Her words were like nails on a chalkboard. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound bitter. "You're dreaming if you think you can claim my house. This place? It's from my family. Jack couldn't lay a claim on it if he tried." Her smug expression faltered, confusion and anger warring on her face. She whipped out her phone, her false nails tapping furiously. "Jack, you better explain this right now. You said this house was ours." In no time, Jack was at the door, his face ashen. "The house, it's Jess's," he stammered, avoiding my gaze. The mistress's face turned a shade of red I didn't know existed. "You pathetic liar. You promised me a fairy tale, and now you're telling me it's just a bedtime story?" I watched the drama unfold, my arms crossed, a smirk playing on my lips. But I had one more card to play. "Seems like we're airing dirty laundry today. Why not throw in these?" I said, slapping the photos on the table. "Looks like someone's been two-timing. Here you are, leaving a hotel with another man. Care to explain, sweetheart?" The room erupted into chaos, a tornado of insults, accusations, and shattered illusions. I stood there, the eye of the storm, watching the destruction. "Thinking of a paternity test, Jack? Might want to find out if you're really the daddy." The aftermath was a scene from a soap opera. The mistress, her dreams shattered, stormed out, leaving Jack standing in the ruins of his choices. And me? I stood tall, the victor in a battle I never wanted to fight. The final chapter of the tumultuous saga brought both closure and new beginnings. The divorce was more than a legal separation, it was the severing of ties that had bound me to a life of uncertainty and betrayal. Jack, in a desperate attempt to cling to a shred of dignity, underwent the DNA test, only to have his illusions shattered. The child he thought was his bore no trace of his DNA. Helen and George, once the loving grandparents and in-laws, now stood as my steadfast allies. George's decision to create a trust fund for Max wasn't just about securing a future for his grandson, it was a statement, a clear denouncement of Jack's actions. "This boy's future won't be clouded by his father's shadow," George had said, his voice heavy with a mix of anger and resolve. The house, once filled with laughter, then whispers of betrayal, was now a sanctuary of peace. It was during one of these quiet evenings that Mr. Harris, or Tom as he insisted, visited. His presence had always been a source of comfort, but this time, there was a different energy about him. "Jess, I hope it's okay, me dropping by like this," Tom began, his hands slightly fidgeting, a contrast to his usual composed demeanor. I offered him a smile, the familiarity of his presence a welcome comfort. "Of course, Tom. It's always good to see you." He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "Jess, I've been doing a lot of thinking, especially after everything that's happened. I've seen you handle life's curveballs with such grace and strength. It made me realize something I should have acknowledged a long time ago." The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken words and emotions. "Tom, what are you trying to say?" His gaze met mine, earnest and unwavering. "I love you, Jess. Not just as the brilliant colleague you are, not just as the friend who's been by my side. I love you for the incredible woman you are, for the strength you embody. I want to be there for you, for Max, if you'll let me." The confession, honest and raw, stirred something within me. A mix of surprise, fear, and a flicker of hope. "Tom, this is a lot to take in. I appreciate your feelings, truly. But I need time to process, to understand what this means for me, for Max, for us." Tom nodded, understanding etching his features. "Take all the time you need, Jess. I'm not going anywhere. I just wanted you to know how I feel, to understand that whatever the future holds, I'm here." As he left, the silence of the house enveloped me. The words we'd exchanged echoed in my mind, a gentle yet profound reminder that life still had surprises in store, that maybe, the end of one chapter was simply the beginning of another. My name's Sarah, 51 years young, or old, depending on the kind of day I'm having. If you're expecting a tale of whimsy or a life that's been anything but ordinary, you might as well grab a seat because it's been one heck of a ride. Let's start with the heart of my world, Emily. My girl, my everything. Raising her on my lonesome wasn't part of the dream, you know? Her dad decided a fresh start was in order, across the globe, no less, leaving us high and dry. That man swapped us out like last season's wardrobe, and before I knew it, he had himself a shiny new family. So, there it was, just me and Em against the world. My days? They blurred into one long shift, juggling jobs like a circus act. The diner by day, the bar by night, and on good days, a bit of cleaning work squeezed in between. Sleep was a luxury, a fleeting visitor between shifts. But seeing Emily smile, hearing her laugh, that was the real paycheck. But Em, bless her, she's 23 and still figuring out life's big puzzle. Jobs? She's had more than a few, but none stuck. It's the boss, Ma, he's a real piece of work. Or, I can't deal with customers, they're all insane. Excuses as colorful as a painter's palette. Each job ended with her back on our couch, phone in one hand, remote in the other. And me? I just couldn't stay mad at her. It's alright, Em. Something better will come along, I'd say, hiding the worry gnawing at my gut. Because that's what you do when you love someone, you wear the world's troubles so they don't have to. One particularly rough day, after a double shift that had me more bone than flesh, I came home to find Emily sprawled on the sofa, a mess of job application forms scattered around like confetti. Hey, Ma, she greeted without looking up, her attention glued to the TV screen. Hey, kiddo. Anything bite today? I asked, shedding my coat and the weight of the day. She shrugged, a gesture I knew all too well. Nah, it's all crap. Why bother? They don't want to pay a living wage anyway. I sighed, a mix of exhaustion and frustration brewing. Em, we talked about this. You gotta start somewhere, right? Can't be picky in times like these. Whatever, Ma. It's easy for you to say. You're used to busting your back for peanuts, she fired back, her words sharp like a knife. That stung. Not gonna lie. But anger? It never had a place in our home. I bit back the retort simmering on my tongue and instead forced a smile. Maybe so, kiddo. But those peanuts kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. Someday, you'll understand that. Emily rolled her eyes, the universal sign of young adult disdain. Sure, Ma. I'm hitting the sack. Night. Watching her disappear into her room, a part of me ached. Ached for her to see the world not as an adversary, but as a challenge to be met head-on. Yet, there I was, picking up the scattered forms, tidying up the living remnants of her latest defeat. The thing about life is, just when you think you've got it all figured out, it throws you a curveball. And not the kind you can hit out of the park. No, I'm talking about the kind that hits you square in the chest and leaves you gasping for air. That's exactly what happened the day Emily decided to drop her little bombshell. It was a Tuesday, not that it matters, but I remember because Tuesdays were meatloaf nights. I was in the kitchen, elbows deep in ground beef, when Emily waltzed in, her face all lit up like a Christmas tree. Behind her trailed Alex, a guy I'd seen maybe once or twice before. I didn't have anything against him, but let's just say he wouldn't be my first pick for a son-in-law. Not that I was thinking about that kind of stuff, until I had to. Ma, guess what? Emily chirped, bouncing on her heels. I glanced over, eyebrow raised. You finally decided to clean your room? She rolled her eyes, a grin spreading across her face. Funny, Ma. No, better. Alex and I got married. You know that feeling when your heart skips a beat? Yeah, mine skipped, tripped, and fell flat on its face. Married? I echoed, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Alex stepped forward, a sheepish smile plastered on his face. Yeah, Mrs. S., we eloped last weekend. Surprise? Surprise was an understatement. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. Eloped? I repeated, still processing. And you're just telling me now? Emily's excitement dimmed a bit, replaced by a defensive edge. I knew you'd react like this, Ma. That's why we didn't tell you before. But it's done. And we're happy, aren't we, Alex? Alex nodded, slipping an arm around her. Yeah, totally happy. I put down the mixing spoon, wiping my hands on my apron. This was a conversation that needed my full attention. And where, pray tell, do you plan on living? I asked, already dreading the answer. Well, here, Emily said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. With you, Ma. Where else? Where else indeed? I took a deep breath, trying to tamp down the rising tide of frustration. Emily, honey, you're married now. Don't you think it's time you, I don't know, started your own life? Somewhere that's not here? Her face fell. Ma, you know we can't afford that. Alex's job doesn't pay much, and I'm still looking. Looking. Right. The eternal job hunter. I looked from her to Alex, who seemed content to let Emily do the talking. Something about the set of his jaw irked me, the way he seemed to assume this was all fine and dandy. Look. I started, trying to keep my voice even. I love you, Emily. You know I do. But this isn't what I wanted for you. For either of us. Emily's response was swift and sharp. What, Ma? You didn't want me to be happy? Is that it? No, of course not, I countered, feeling the conversation slip away from me. I thought you'd want more. That you'd strive for more. More what, Ma? More work? More nights alone? Thanks, but I'll pass on that. The conversation spiraled from there, each word more heated than the last. Alex tried to chime in, but he might as well have been a fly buzzing around a hurricane. This was between me and my daughter, and it was clear neither of us was going to budge. In the end, we called a truce, but the air remained thick with unsaid things. Alex moved in the next day, his belongings taking up space in a home that suddenly felt too small. I retreated into myself, wondering where I'd gone wrong, how my little girl had grown so far from the dreams I'd had for her. The day I found out about the cancer was the day my world flipped on its head. I'd been feeling off for a while, but cancer? That word felt like a freight train hitting me at full speed. The doctor was gentle about it, but the word still stung. It's treatable, he said. But you'll need to focus on your health, maybe even take some time off work. Work. My lifeline, the thing that kept us afloat all these years, and now I was being told to step back from it. I headed home, the weight of the diagnosis crushing me. The house was quiet when I got in, too quiet. Emily was in her room, probably lost in her phone, and Alex, well, Alex was Alex, doing whatever it was that he did. I needed them, needed their support, so I called them both to the living room. Guys, we need to talk, I started, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound strong. Emily looked up, her eyes wide. What's up, Ma? You look like hell. I sighed, not sure how to say the words. I've got cancer, I blurted out, the words feeling alien and heavy on my tongue. There was a moment of silence, and then Emily's face changed, but not in the way I'd hoped. Cancer? But, what does that mean, for, us? Her question caught me off guard. Well, it means I'll be going through treatment, and I had to quit my job to focus on getting better. The room went cold. Alex, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke up. Quit your job? How are we supposed to live, then? My job barely covers my stuff. I stared at them, disbelief washing over me. This was their concern? Not my health, not the battle I was about to face, but their comfort? Emily chimed in, her tone sharp. Yeah, Ma, how could you not think about us? What are we supposed to do now? The disappointment hit me like a second diagnosis. My own daughter, the girl I'd raised, sacrificed for, was more worried about her financial comfort than my fight for life. I thought you'd be worried about me, about what I'm going through, I said, my voice breaking. Well, of course, we're worried, Emily said, her voice softening just a touch. But we've got to be practical here. You can't just quit and expect everything to be okay. Alex nodded in agreement. Yeah, it's not just about you anymore. We've got to think about the future. The future. Their future apparently didn't include the possibility of me not being in it. I realized then what I'd done, or rather, what I hadn't done. I'd raised a daughter who saw me not as a person fighting for her life, but as a means to an end, a financial safety net. After weeks of harsh treatments, the hospital finally sent me home. I was a shell of my former self, hollowed out by radiation and chemotherapy, clinging to the hope that within the familiar walls of my home, I might find some solace, some shred of normalcy. But what greeted me was far from the support and care I had envisioned. The air at home had shifted, it was thick with tension, heavy with unspoken resentments. My daughter, Emily, and her husband, Alex, had taken to treating me more like an inconvenient guest than family. Their patience wore thin at the slightest provocation, their words sharp and cutting. One day, trying to make myself a cup of tea, my hands betrayed me, trembling from the weakness that had become my constant companion. The mug slipped, shattering on the floor, with a sound that seemed to echo my own fragility. The crash brought Emily storming into the kitchen. Seriously, Ma? Can't you do anything right? Look at this mess. Her words were like daggers, and I stood there, mute, the shards of the broken mug mirroring the pieces of my heart. I'm sorry, Em. I didn't mean to. My apology was cut short by Alex's voice, barely a whisper yet loud enough to carry his disdain. How tired you are, you sick old woman. Their words, sharp and unforgiving, were a far cry from the care I had hoped for, the love I thought we shared. Each day was a battle, not against the cancer that ravaged my body, but against the coldness that had taken root in my own home. I moved through the days and a days, my every action, every sound, seemingly an annoyance to them. Asking for help became an exercise in humiliation. Em, could you help me up? I'd ask, reaching out for support. The response was always the same, a huff of irritation, a reminder of her own priorities. And so there are plenty of things to do, and you too, she'd snap, leaving me to fend for myself. Night after night, I cried myself to sleep, the sound of my sobs a solitary lament in the silence of the house. I was a burden, a nuisance in my own home, my presence an unwelcome reminder of the fragility of life. Due to constant stress, my health deteriorated, and I was admitted to the room again. After weeks of silence and solitude in the hospital, the last person I expected to see was Emily. Her visits had become as rare as a cool breeze in a heat wave, and yet, there she was, standing at the foot of my hospital bed, looking every bit as uncomfortable as I felt surprised. Hey, Ma, she started, avoiding my gaze. How you feeling? The casualness of her question, as if she'd been by my side all along, stung. Been better, I replied, my voice raspy from disuse. What brings you here, Em? Finally decided to check on your old mother? She fidgeted, looking anywhere but at me. Yeah, well, there's something we need to talk about. It's about the house. The house. My sanctuary, the only legacy my grandmother left me, and our only real home. A lump formed in my throat. What about it? Emily finally met my gaze, her eyes hard. Alex and we've been talking, and we think it's best if you transfer the house to us. Legally, I mean. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Transfer the house? To you and Alex? Why on earth would I do that? She crossed her arms, her discomfort replaced by defiance. Because, Ma, it's practical. Alex is sick of living there, like he's some sort of freeloader. We want to own it, make it ours. It's not like you're going to be around forever, anyway. Her words felt like a slap. The audacity, the sheer insensitivity. My own daughter, viewing my home, my life, as nothing more than a transaction to secure her future comfort. You think I'm just going to hand over everything because your husband doesn't like feeling like a guest? In my own house? It's not just that, Ma. It makes sense. You're here, sick, and who knows for how long. We're thinking about the future. The future? I echoed, incredulous. And what about my future, Emily? Did you ever stop to think about that? Or is it just about what you and Alex want? She sighed, a sound of frustration and impatience. You're being unreasonable, Ma. We're just trying to be practical here. Practical? I shot back, anger and hurt swirling inside me. You're talking about my home like it's a prize to be won. I worked hard for that house, kept it through everything. And you, my own daughter, you come here, not to see how I'm doing, not to offer comfort or support, but to ask me to give up my home? For what? So you can feel more secure in your marriage? Emily looked away. I thought you'd understand, Ma. But I can see you're just too selfish to see the bigger picture. Selfish? The accusation was a bitter pill to swallow. My whole life, I'd given everything to Emily, sacrificed so much, and now, in my time of need, this was how she saw me? Understanding has nothing to do with it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. This is about respect, about family. And right now, I don't know if I even recognize you, Emily. Without another word, she turned and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts, my pain, and a heart heavier than it had been before. Lying in the sterile silence of the hospital room, the buzzing of my phone felt like a lifeline to the outside world. When I saw it was Janice, my friend who's been in real estate since we were in high school, my heart skipped a beat. She never called without good reason. Hey, Janice. What's up? I tried to keep my voice steady, despite the dread settling in my stomach. Sarah, I don't know how to say this, but I was at the office today, and I saw a listing. It's your house, Sarah. Emily and that husband of hers are trying to sell it. The room spun. What? That can't be right. My house? Are you sure? As sure as I'm standing here. I thought it was a mistake, but I checked the documents myself. They've forged your signature, Sarah. It's listed under their names now. Anger and disbelief churned inside me. But, how could they? I never gave them any permission. This has to be illegal. It is, Sarah. You need to act fast. I knew she was right. My next call was to Mike, an old friend from college who ended up becoming a lawyer. Explaining the situation left me feeling exposed and vulnerable, but Mike's calm demeanor was a small comfort. Sarah, this is serious. We need to file for an injunction immediately to stop the sale. I'll need every piece of documentation you have on the house. We can argue forgery and undue influence, but we have to move quickly. Okay, Mike. I'll get you everything. I can't believe Emily would do this to me. To her own mother. It's unfortunate, but let's focus on protecting what's yours. I'll start the paperwork. Hang tight, Sarah. Hanging up, I was enveloped by a profound sense of betrayal. My own daughter, scheming behind my back to steal the only thing I had left from my grandmother. The thought was suffocating. Days passed in a blur of legal documents and phone calls. Mike was a godsend, navigating the legal maze with a precision that gave me hope. Meanwhile, I couldn't bring myself to confront Emily, not yet. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. For days, I interacted with Emily and Alex as if all was well, all the while coordinating with Mike to build our case. Their casualness around me, the way they dodged my gaze, only fueled my resolve. I had to protect what was rightfully mine. When Emily came to visit, feigning concern, I had to stifle a scoff. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. How are you holding up? Her words were hollow, and I played along. I've been better, Em. But I'm hanging in there. How's things at home? I prodded, curious if she'd slip up. Good, good. Alex and I are just, keeping busy. The evasion in her voice was palpable. The conversation danced around the elephant in the room, both of us playing our parts in a twisted performance. After she left, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow for the relationship we once had. But this betrayal? It was a line crossed, and there was no turning back. Mike called later with updates. We're all set, Sarah. You ready for this? More than ever, Mike. Let's do it. As I lay in my hospital bed, staring at the sterile ceiling, I couldn't help but marvel at the situation. My own daughter, plotting against me, and here I was, about to turn the tables. Released from the hospital for a bit, I have started to fulfill my plan. Janice was in on it too. She helped me set it up so I'd show up at my own house, pretending to be interested in buying it. The thought alone had my heart racing with a mix of nerves and a strange sense of excitement. I arrived at the house, dressed differently, hoping Emily and Alex wouldn't recognize me right off the bat. The moment they opened the door, their faces went from eager to sell to outright horror. It was almost comical, seeing them scramble to make sense of what was happening. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Emily stammered, her face pale. "Thought I'd take a look at my own house, considering it's up for sale and all." "Nice listing, by the way," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Alex, ever the smooth talker, tried to recover. "Sarah, look, this is just a big misunderstanding. Let's talk about this." "Misunderstanding?" I scoffed. "Forging my signature and trying to sell my house is a bit more than that, don't you think?" Without another word, I stepped outside and called the police. As I explained the situation, I watched Emily and Alex from the window, their expressions a mix of fear and disbelief. When the police arrived, Emily and Alex were taken away in handcuffs. Their pleas and cries echoed down the street, but my heart was hardened against them. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too fresh. After the dust settled, the quiet in my house was both eerie and soothing. It was just me now, alone with the echoes of a life that once was. The days melded into one another as I focused on my health, on healing not just my body, but my battered heart as well. Miraculously, my health began to turn a corner. The cancer that once seemed like a death sentence slowly retreated into the shadows, giving me a new lease on life. The trial of Emily and Alex was a spectacle, one I attended with a heavy heart. Watching them, so small and defeated in the courtroom, stirred something in me, but it wasn't enough to overcome the betrayal. They pleaded, tears streaming down their faces, begging for my forgiveness. But forgiveness was a river that had run dry. The court handed down a modest sentence for their crimes, but no punishment could right the wrongs they'd done. Word got around, as it always does in small towns. Some folks shook their heads, sking at my hard-heartedness, unable to understand how I could turn my back on my own flesh and blood. But most knew the pain of betrayal, and they stood by me, offering nods of understanding and silent support. It's funny, really, how something so earth-shattering can shift your perspective. I used to care so much about what people thought, about being the perfect mother, the perfect neighbor. But life has a way of teaching you that perfection is a facade, and approval is a fickle friend. One afternoon, as I sat on my porch, basking in the solitude, Janice stopped by, her presence a welcome break in the monotony. "Sarah, you're looking better every day," she said, taking the seat beside me. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached deep into my weary soul. "Feeling it, too. It's funny how peace can heal you in ways medicine can't." Janice nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "Not everyone agrees with your choices, you know. But I think you're one of the bravest people I know." I let out a chuckle, a sound tinged with sadness and wisdom born of pain. "Brave? No, I wouldn't say that. Just tired. Tired of bending until I break. Now, I'm just living for me, and if that's brave, then so be it." Janice squeezed my hand, a silent show of solidarity. "Living for yourself is all any of us can do, Sarah. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing a damn fine job at it." As she left, her words lingered in the air like a benediction. I turned my face to the sky, letting the warmth of the sun seep into my bones. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something like hope, like joy. So, I live. I live for the quiet mornings and the peaceful nights. I live for the friends who stood by me and for the strength I found in solitude. I live with the knowledge that not everyone will understand my journey, and that's okay. Because at the end of the day, it's my journey, and mine alone.